Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku found salvation in a stranger's hand? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Eraserhead was making short work of the villains that invaded the USJ. Entangling people in his capture weapon, swinging them around and throwing them like the hammer throwers from the Olympics. The fighters being knocked out before even attempting to activate their quirks. The hero, expertly and efficiently dancing and dashing between the ranks, spreading them out and thinning the crowd. 29 seconds. Eraserhead ran from a four-armed mutant, leading him to another group before deftly dodging out of the way. The mutants' momentum bulldozing through the unaware victims. 23 seconds. Some of the ranged fighters were attempting a volley of energy beams and projectiles, hoping to at least clip him. Their quirks were erased, but the attacks still went flying, the bigger physical projectiles being caught and slung back to their originators. 15 seconds. The bigger mutants started standing up again, attempting to surround him, but their movements were too slow, allowing Eraserhead to slip through and knock them back down. Eraserhead was slowly but surely taking out the villains, practically steamrolling through them with skill that only years of training and experience could accomplish. He never stopped moving, never appeared to run out of energy, and never spent more time than strictly necessary on taking his opponents down. This was the mark of a hero, someone who stood up against all odds to bring safety to the masses. It would only make sense for the mark of a villain to be able to take one of them down. Amid the dispatching of another group of 3 villains, the one who appeared to be the leader started to move. Unwilling to let a single movement go to waste, Eraserhead sent out a strand of his capture weapon at the new opponent, but unlike the rest, this one looked to know what he was doing. The leader caught the end in the air, and instead of attempting to throw it away like others tried, he wrapped it around his arm, forcing Eraserhead to keep his attention on him. The leader yanked hard, surprising him with strength that didn't match the physique. Leaning into the momentum of the pull, Eraserhead intercepted the villain with an elbow strike to his diaphragm, earning him a quiet oof. Satisfied that the leader was at least temporarily stunned, he tried pulling away to follow up with a more definite strike but found he couldn't. "You know, Eraserhead, your quirk is pretty cool," the leader started, his grip on his elbow heating up ever so slowly. "It's so simple, yet you've made it so effective, and the way you're incorporating that into how you fight is nothing short of incredible." Behind his slitted goggles, Eraserhead's eyes widened as his shirt burst on fire. "However, it still isn't without fault," the leader taunted. Eraserhead realized too late that erasure was no longer active, and the fire probably came from the villain. In such close quarters, his attacks were limited, but he still had to try something. Eraserhead aimed his left knee towards the leader's ribs, hoping to get some breathing room. The leader noticed and ducked under the attack. In a feat of strength and speed, the leader swept out Eraserhead's right leg out from under him and kicked him into the air. Immediately following, the villain brought his leg up above the airborne hero and delivered an axe kick to his back on the way down. Eraserhead landed hard on the ground, stunned and out of breath. He tried to get up but found himself pinned. The leader had his right knee on his back, left foot stepping on his left elbow, left hand on the back of his head, and the other holding his right arm at an awkward angle. The leader leaned in close to Eraserhead's ear. "You're not suited to drawn-out battles, Eraser. You specialize in ambush attacks, nigh on guerrilla tactics, yet you still jumped in to greet us. You knew you were outmatched, but you still rushed in like a fan to a meet-up. What did you hope to achieve? Giving your students some peace of mind?" The villain smashed Eraserhead's head into the ground. "The outcome of this fight was decided the moment you chose to come fight us." Blood started to trickle down his forehead, bleeding into his eyes. Eraserhead turned slightly to get a better look at the leader and grunted out, "My life is nowhere near as important as the students. So as long as they're safe from you, I'd have done my job." The leader hummed almost thoughtfully, "I'll be sure to keep that in mind, Eraser." The last word was spat out with malice as the villain smashed Eraserhead into the ground again, hard enough to crack the cement. With Eraserhead out of commission for now, the leader stood up and looked around. Under any other circumstance, he would have loved to get a tour of the USJ. So many different zones to explore, so many scenarios to try out, so many places he would have loved to just have some fun. You're kidding me. This has to be a joke, right? A small boy with purple balls on his head whined loudly. We barely survived getting off that stupid boat and escaping those villains in the flood zone, but now this? The monster mask guy took out Aizawa-sensei like no big deal. The girl next to him had big eyes and a round face. Her hands were proportionately bigger than a normal person's, and her figure was slightly hunched, which gave her a frog-like look. She quickly wrapped her hands around his mouth, shushing him. Mineta, please be quiet. It looks like the villain hasn't noticed we're here yet. If you start yelling, we'll be in bigger trouble. But we're already in bigger trouble, Mineta hissed. Our teacher got taken down. That other hero is at the entrance, which, by the way, is nowhere near us, and the only way to get back there is by going directly through where the main villain is. A curse could be heard further to Mineta's right. I hate that all of those points made sense, the voice rasped out. Mineta and the frog girl turned to face who spoke. The voice belonged to a boy with messy black hair, gray eyes, and a small mole under his lips on the right side. But we've got to do something. We can't just sit here waiting for help to come. The villains that Aizawa-sensei took out are getting back up, and it doesn't look like he's moving at all either. He's a sitting duck. The frog girl pointed her finger at her chin in thought. So what do you suggest, Shimura-kun? As much as I hate to admit it as well, Mineta has a point. We were barely able to escape the villains in the flood zone because we were at a major disadvantage. If we go out there, we'll just be putting ourselves in greater danger. Shimura lightly scratched at his neck before crossing his arms in thought. We're all mainly close-range fighters, with Azui dash. Tsu interjected. Tsuyu-san dash, Shimura tried again. Tsu. Shimura gave her a pained expression. Tsu-chan. He leveled a challenging glare at her, but she just nodded in acceptance. Tsu-chan and Mineta, you both have some ranged attacks, but nothing that could really get us through safely, right? Mineta nodded in agreement, but Tsu spoke up. I can use my tongue as a weapon, but with how that villain dealt with Aizawa-sensei, I don't want to risk it. Shimura nodded in understanding and looked down at his hands. There's gotta be something I can do. He flicked between looking at his hands and the entrance. Eventually his gaze found the floor. A thought suddenly popped in his head. I could burrow us through. The other teens looked at him confused. Unperturbed he continued, I could decay us a spot to enter here, and then tunnel underneath the ground and resurface at the bottom of the stairs. Tsu quirked her head to the right while Mineta nodded up and down in clear agreement. Before Shimura could touch the ground, Tsu stopped him. But how will you know where we're going afterwards? We could end up cutting through something important like power lines, or end up in a completely different disaster zone. We won't know which way is straight, and we don't know how far it is from here to the stairs. Shimura hung his head in shame. He hadn't thought that far ahead yet. Tsu, still trying to stay positive, pat his back. It's all right, Shimura-kun, it was a good idea. How about we just get out of the water and hide a little better while we wait for the other teachers to get here? The trio moved out of the water as quickly and quietly as they could and settled behind some bushes that were dotting the edge of the zone. Underneath his breath, Mineta muttered, if they come. Still reveling in the chaos that's happening around him, the villain feels a shift in the atmosphere and looks to his left. A purple and black mist with yellow eyes materialized. Kadero Shigaraki, I regret to inform you that I failed in my objective. The Heralings prevented me from keeping them contained, and one of them slipped outside. The heroes are sure to be inbound. A small puff of fire escaped the mouth of the mask he was wearing. So it's like that, huh? Don't worry too much, Kurogiri. While it is indeed unfortunate, things are still going more or less to plan. After all, Kadero turned to face Kurogiri fully, eyes blazing with anticipation. How can we introduce ourselves properly if the whole party isn't here? And that, Yagi-kun, is why you should always have a rubric, a small, white-furred creature explained. Even if your assignments don't necessarily require one, it's always good to plan out beforehand how you would grade the students by separating your expectations into tiers. Just remember to not set them too high, they are still students after all. The man opposite the creature nursed his teacup as he tried to digest the veritable lecture he was receiving. He had yellow hair, splayed wildly in all directions with two main long bangs framing his face. His eyes were sunken in so deep it cast a shadow over them, but piercing blue irises shone through the darkness. The man's gaunt figure was still crouched on the floor, hugging his ankles. He coughed into a handkerchief. Yes, well, thank you very much for the advice, Principal Nezu. I am aware that I am a little lacking in teaching young students, but this is still not enough to deter me. Nezu looked Yagi over, his beady eyes scanning every inch of him before responding, but of course. This is your first year of teaching after all. Even some of our tenured teachers still struggle from time to time. Yagi puffed a sigh of relief, finally seeing the lull he needed to sneak away. I'm sure I'll be able to get the hang of it in no time, sir. By the way, you haven't been able to get in touch with Aizawa-kun or 13-sen either then, I take it? Yagi sputtered. You were aware of the lack of contact as well? Why did you keep me here? What if they are in trouble? Yagi started to stand up and was just about to rush out the window before he saw the principal raise his paw. Firstly, there is nothing that happens on this campus, the businesses directly connected to us, and the buildings we own that I do not have, at the very least, an inkling of what's going on. Secondly, it's precisely because they might be in trouble that I chose to keep you here. But why? Yagi asked exasperatedly. If the students or teachers are in trouble and I'm not there, then I am failing in my duty as a hero. I already failed them as a teacher for not being there from the beginning. Yagi-kun, I kept you here because you needed to rest. Taking the sudden stillness from him as a sign to continue, Nezu moved on. You've already used up most of your valuable time. That's why you were hiding out in the teacher's lounge and not with Class 1A at the USJ, is it not? Had you gone out the second you noticed you weren't getting a response from Aizawa-kun or 13-san, would you have been able to take care of the problem, maintain your form after its resolution, and then keep it until you were behind closed doors? Yagi sighed in defeat and shook his head. No. If I'm being honest, if I went right then I probably would have changed right as I entered through the doors. Nezu hummed and walked towards the door. Then with your break, I believe I have bought you another 30 minutes. Please ensure the safety of my students and staff, all might. Shigaraki heard the groans of the fodder he brought out for the occasion as they slowly stirred. Unsurprisingly, the mutants were mostly recovered and already were staggering towards him. He studied the one closest to him, offhandedly remembering him to be the one that Eraser threw into another group of fodder. So, boss, the man coughed out, I hear that right? The heroes are on their way? We should probably get gone soon. With Shigaraki's focus now solely on him, the villain faltered in his steps. The villain had never actually gotten a good look at who their boss was, but now that he has, the villain was glad that he didn't get the chance before. Shigaraki's mask was colored a deep forest green and fashioned to look like a dragon's maw, covering everything except his eyes. The hood was up on his black and green jacket, keeping the top half in a perpetual shadow, his eyes almost shining in the darkness. Under his sleeves, the villain could make out some sort of bracers, but all that was visible was a little part protruding at the base of his palms. Black pants were tucked into steel-toed combat boots, with 3 knives holstered to both thighs. If the villain was being honest, Shigaraki didn't look all too dangerous besides the mask, but the intense aura that surrounded him and the cold, calculating eyes said otherwise. The villain knew that one wrong move could end up with him being dead, so he didn't voice his thoughts. No, Shigaraki replied, far from it. Grab 2 other mutant types, I want you on guard duty. The villain quirked an eyebrow. Guard duty? It's not like we have anything to defend here. Shigaraki turned and pointed to where Eraserhead was still laying. You're guarding him. Mutant types aren't affected by his quirk, and are generally stronger than the others. Just make sure he stays down. I don't want to have to deal with him too on top of whoever else is coming. You can't just dash. Shigaraki was already walking away. I'm not wrong though. Just shut up and do your job. Kurogiri. The mentioned villain materialized next to him once again. I want you to bring it in. If Kurogiri was surprised he didn't show it. Are you sure, Kadero Shigaraki? We were told it hasn't been tested yet. Exactly. What better way to perform a test than on the heroes? If it gets defeated, we get good data. If it doesn't, we get good data. It's already been programmed to take commands and's already keyed into my voice. This'll give us a good baseline to work with. Very well. Kurogiri did as he was told and opened another portal. This time a hulking figure came out. Large muscles lined its body, but it was far from natural. Its skin was black and littered with bright red scars, but its head was the most disturbing part. A bird-like beak lined with sharp teeth sat where the mouth should be, its brain exposed to the air, and it had round soulless eyes set into it. In all aspects of the word, this was an abomination. A monster. Something that shouldn't exist and went against reality. Shoji-kun, do you have any updates? A girl clad in a pink and blue bodysuit asked. Give me a second, the multi-limbed boy replied as he formed more eyes and ears on his appendages. I can't hear Ida's engines anymore, so he's probably close to if not already at the school. It's hard to tell what's going on in the downpour and conflagration zones due to the ambient weather, but the other zones seem like their fights are dwindling down. Shimura, Azui, and Mineta made it safely to the edge of the flood zone, and are hanging out at the edge. As he was reporting, he heard a massive boom to the left. That was definitely Bakugo, so he's still out there. I can't hear anything from over in the landslide zone, so either everybody there is knocked out or it was empty from the start. I can only hear the barest of whispers from the mountain zone, so something is still happening there. Another student was hunched over the prone form of 13, patching up their back with strands of tape coming from his elbow. Wow, you can get all that info from all the way up here? Man, am I glad you're with us, otherwise we'd be completely in the dark. If that's how you feel here, another chimed in, this one wearing a yellow bodysuit and had big lips. Just imagine what it's like for our classmates out there. What about Aizawa? Another voice croaked out. The students followed the voice to 13, who was still laying down. Shoji gulped before answering. Aizawa-sensei still looks and sounds unconscious. The main villain told one of the other ones down there to watch and make sure he doesn't get back up, but they're all just standing around him. I don't think he's in any more immediate danger. That's good, that's good. And what about Ida and the rest of you? A pink-skinned girl that was still kneeling next to 13 replied. Shoji-kun said that he can't hear Ida anymore, so he was probably able to get help. As for the rest of us here anyway, we're doing all right, the girl from before picked up. It's kinda like we're in that weird time before something big happens. We haven't been attacked since Ida-kun managed to get out, so I guess we have some good news. 13 groaned and tried to turn onto their side. We're in one of the most critical times of a fight, the calm. I wish I could have helped more. I'm sorry for being such a burden. The hero students, minus Shoji, all started waving their hands, showing that they don't blame them for what's happening. The tape-elbowed boy was in the middle of saying his reassurances when he saw Shoji tense. Hey, Shoji. You all right over there, man? He asked cautiously. I believe we are now entering the second wave of the attack. Everybody tensed at the serious tone of his voice and prepared themselves as best as they could. Let's see if we're missing anything, the leader started, his thumb tracing the outlines of the teeth on his mask. Eraser's out cold still and I've got people watching over him. It's here to run interference for the stronger pros. Ah, that's right. Kurogiri, we're leaving this place. Still observing from the edge of the flood zone, Mineta started rejoicing loudly. They're leaving? We're safe. It's over. Once again, Tsu wrapped her hands around his face to silence him. Shimura-kun, I don't like this one bit. Shimura nodded slightly, eyes bulging as his hands found his way to his throat as he started scratching. Yeah? Why would they leave when they're right at the brink of winning? They even brought out that thing. The students saw a portal open, all of them holding their breath in hopes that this is truly the end of this nightmare. None of the figures made to step into it, not even the villains still scattered in the pavilion. But before that, how about we leave a little parting gift for the little heralings over by the water? All 3 students tensed at hearing them being mentioned, but they were all frozen in their spots. They saw the leader turn and rush in their direction, faster than they could expect. Their vision was filled by fire shooting out of his hands before abruptly being cut off. The leader froze, hands still in firing position. You had one job, he yelled, his head turning to glimpse behind him. Don't kill him yet, just make sure he stays down this time. I really underestimated you, Eraser. You're a lot more stubborn than I gave you credit for. The villains standing around Eraserhead were in shock as they saw him looking up, his gaze settled directly on their boss. The one closest grabbed Eraserhead's head and smashed it into the floor multiple times while the others were kicking his body. Each blow Eraserhead grunted in pain until he slumped down again. Shimura's mind finally caught up to what was happening, and his body started to move. He tugged at the parts covering his right ring and pinky fingers, the fabric receding from covering his fingertips. He reached his hand out to grasp the villain. "Get away from us." Quieter than ever before, the villain spoke again, "Nomu." A black blur came between the villain and Shimura and let out a piercing, inhuman scream. The part that Shimura's hand was touching turned gray and immediately started decaying, turning the flesh into meat chunks and ash. Shimura was once again frozen in shock as his hand stayed where it was, the decay spreading further and further along the Nomu's body, its screams growing in a crescendo. Shimura stumbled back, finally ending contact. "What's this?" the leader asked aloud, a 5-point contact requirement, with a spreading effect on the contacted area. Almost like a poison in that it immediately starts spreading, and by the looks will keep going if the areas aren't immediately amputated? How fascinating. The leader was now staring directly at Shimura. "And you were willing to use it on an enemy combatant when it's clear that you could kill with a single touch. Are you sure you want to be a hero?" Shimura felt a massive hand close around his fist and felt it squeeze hard, breaking it into pieces. Shimura let out a pained scream and fell to the ground, crawling back to his friends as they crowded around him. To their horror, the Nomu's body started to regenerate with a terrible squelching sound. Internal organs were regrown and reconnected, bones and muscle fibers wrapping around the organs, until finally the skin had grown to cover the areas. Less than a few seconds later, the Nomu looked like nothing happened to it. The leader stood up fully, lightly dusting himself off. "A valiant attempt, Hero Ling. Truly. Had you kept touching the Nomu, I'm sure you would have been able to defeat it single-handedly. A shame you won't get to try that again." The Nomu grabbed his other hand and was about to squeeze as the doors to the USJ flew open. A single silhouette was in the doorway, but everyone in the building knew exactly who it was. The students that had a line of sight to the door, no matter where they were, all released small tears of joy. Their hero was finally here, but where that bright smile usually was, a deep frown was in its place. All Might wasn't smiling, nor was he projecting his voice like he normally does. This was quiet, showing the fury and anger he currently feels. "I am here." The leader glanced up to meet his gaze. "About time, number one." A chorus of All Might-s could be heard throughout the USJ, from villains and students alike. The villains said it out of fear and intimidation, the students said it out of relief and joy. All Might himself paid them no mind, simply staring down at the figures below. His steps were carefully measured and his arms were swinging stiffly. "I apologize for not being here earlier," All Might stated, his frown turning into a grimace. "I had made a poor mistake in the morning, one that you students are unfortunately paying the price for. Fear not, everything is fine now. I am here." The leader stood up fully. "I was beginning to wonder if that Heroling actually made it out. It's like I went for an autograph but came out with a phone number." All the villains Eraserhead initially knocked out were already standing, but were slowly taking steps back. They knew that if they couldn't stand up against a nobody, there was no way they could stand up to the All Might. All Might crouched down in preparation for a jump, and the villains tensed in hopeful response. All Might suddenly vanished from view, and they all went down when he reappeared. In the blink of an eye, All Might took out the villain standing in front of him and was already standing back at the base of the stairs, holding an unconscious Eraserhead in his arms. "I'm sorry, Aizawa." He faced the leader and the students, again disappearing and reappearing with them in his other arm, a safe distance away from the villain. Sometime during All Might's dash, he landed a glancing blow on the leader, enough to blow his hood off and tear the mask from his face. The leader's face was partly covered by windswept hair, but he pushed it out of the way, crouching down to pick up his mask. "Amazing, simply amazing," the leader exclaimed with joy, puffs of flame coming out of his mouth. "So fast. To be able to move that fast while carrying a full-grown man, 3 teenagers, and hit me without me even reacting? You're something else, number one." The students shifted uncomfortably while All Might took on a readied stance, finally able to get a look at the leader's face. His hair was the same forest green as his mask with black undertones, a wild and curly mess. His face was round, but with a slightly chiseled jaw, and fair-skinned if a little on the paler side. His eyes were an iridescent green that looked as if they were glowing, but what was most noticeable was the scar on his face. A gash led from the middle of his left cheek down to his chin, continuing on his neck. The leader replaced his mask and took a deep breath to calm himself. But I was still able to follow you. I've heard rumors, but it seems like there was a grain of truth in them. You really are getting weaker. The students picked up Eraserhead and were about to leave before Shimura spoke up. All Might, that brain villain, the Nomu. It has super regeneration or something. I touched it and it came back. I don't know what else it can do, but those muscles must mean it's strong too. Young Shimura, if it's only super regeneration and strength, this will be much easier than I was expecting. All Might flashed him a smile and a thumbs up. Shimura and the others walked away, fully trusting him to deal with the villains. With the students out of harm's way, All Might went in for the attack, crossing his arms in an X position, Carolina smash. The leader didn't move a muscle, Nomu. Again, the beast came between him and the attack. Taking the full force of All Might smash, the Nomu was flung backwards, forcing the leader to step aside to avoid getting caught up. The Nomu flew through the air, skipping a few times before hitting the walls of the downpour zone, chest caved in and arms mangled. All Might was never one to gloat, but with the day he's been having, he let himself slip a little in appearances. It appears those muscles were all for show after all. He turned to the leader. Now, villain, surrender now and we can call this attack a failure. The leader tilted his head to the left in confusion. Surrender now? Call this a failure? You seem to misunderstand. Number one, this is only the beginning. With his mask covering his face, All Might couldn't see it, but with how the leader's eyes were crinkling, he could tell that he was smiling. Not willing to let things continue, All Might pressed the attack. Nomu, stop playing around and fight. All Might raised his eyebrow in confusion but moved on anyway. As he threw a fist straight at the leader, he found himself interrupted once again. A cloud of smoke was in his way, but he knew his fist was solidly in the body of the Nomu, completely healed. So that confirms Tenko's claim for super regeneration. The rest of the smoke cleared, showing the Nomu standing there completely unaffected. His brows raised and his eyes widened a fraction, but why didn't it go flying like last time? The Nomu raised its arms trying to grapple him, but All Might dodged out of the way. Confused, he heard the leader call out. He would have looked at him, but his focus was now on avoiding getting grabbed. The heroling, young Shimura, you called him? He was right, Nomu does have super regeneration. He saw it in action after he nearly took it down. Through dodging and counterattacking, All Might grunted out, keep his name out of your mouth, villain. Shimura-chan only guessed one of its quirks right? Hearing that, All Might froze for a fraction of a second. The Nomu took advantage of this and tightly gripped All Might's waist, picking him up and suplexing him, bringing up a massive cloud of dust. When it settled, All Might found himself pinned, much like the leader had Eraserhead before. The leader walked up and crouched down in front of All Might, confident he wouldn't break out. What happened, number one? Something catch you off guard? All Might struggled in response, but the leader waved him off. No matter. Care to take another guess? Here, I'll even give you a free shot. Nomu let him up. The Nomu did as it was told and got off All Might. All Might himself got up slowly, carefully watching the villain and Nomu for any signs of deceit. He rolled his right arm out a little, moving away to a position where he could see both opponents, eyeing them both. What tricks do you have up your sleeve? No tricks, the leader just shrugged. Nomu has two quirks. One you already know as super regeneration, the other still unknown. Go ahead, one clean hit. Figure it out. All Might didn't move a muscle. Who are you? Kadero Shigaraki, leader of the League of Villains. Now are you going to take your chance or not? I promise you, you won't get another one. Just hurry up and do it. I have other things still to do. How will I know you won't attack me when my back is turned? You won't. All Might stood there, watching Shigaraki closely. Nothing about his body language suggested he was lying, and his tone seemed genuine enough, but that could very well just be a ruse. Shigaraki crossed his arms and started to tap his finger, seemingly losing patience. Not wanting to have to deal with two dangerous villains at once, All Might heaved a sigh, nodding. Shigaraki seemed to light up upon seeing this. Perfect. Remember, you can strike the Nomu only. I'll give you a little time to think before continuing the fight. All Might nodded and squared up to the Nomu, its eyes looking at him but not seeing, arms hanging limply at its side. All Might closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Opening them again, he rushed forward. Smash. Before, no cloud of dust kicked up and the Nomu didn't go flying either. In fact, the Nomu looked completely unaffected. All Might stared at the beast in shock. No one has ever taken a hit like that before, not since that villain a few years back, but there was no way this was him. All Might couldn't find his voice, his mouth opening and closing. Shigaraki seemed to be grinning behind his mask, his voice giving it away. No guesses? I thought you were smarter than that, number one. All Might regained enough of his senses to remember he was still in the middle of his fight and prepared himself again. Its second quirk is shock absorption. Have fun, number one. Nomu, 3 seconds. All Might was still busy processing the new information, completely missing the fact that Shigaraki had slipped through a portal and was gone. All Might caught a glimpse of movement and immediately snapped back to attention. The 3 seconds Shigaraki mentioned must have been a countdown to let him get away. Looks like he has his work cut out for him. Kadero stepped out of the portal, finding himself at the top of one of the buildings in the collapsed zone with a clear view of the fight between the Nomu and All Might. Next to him, the mist coalesced and receded, changing its form into the shape of a body, clothed in attire that looked akin to a bartender at a fancy restaurant. Was it wise to tell All Might the Nomu had multiple quirks? Kurogiri asked. Master wanted to stay hidden for a while longer. Kadero brought his hand up to his mask, pressing on the 2 lower canines, causing it to recede into pieces stuck behind his ear. Master is still presumed to be dead to those in the know, and is completely unknown to the general public. Regardless of me telling All Might Nomu's quirks, he would have found out eventually. But now All Might knows for certain that there are beings with multiple quirks. There is only one person who has the power to dash. There are 2, and countless others are close to achieving it, perhaps within my lifetime. Master is of course the first, original and the main, but times have changed. The idea of producing a multi-quirked being has been in the works since the advent of quirks. All major countries will deny this, but they all have scientists attempting to achieve this goal. Me telling All Might this has only shaken his belief that he already completely defeated Master. Kadero rolled his neck, a few pops sounding out. He'll most likely try to reconfirm everything from their fight, the location, the people involved, even the documents he signed off on to keep things under wraps. He'll go through everything before coming to the conclusion Master has his hand in this. When he finds out everything is just as he remembers it, he'll relax a little, but the thought of possibly having failed will stay with him. Kurogiri stayed silent, knowing that arguing the point further will only cause them both to lose focus. Turning his head, he studied Kagero's expression. He could see his eyes moving about wildly as he tracked the movements of the fighters. He could see his mouth slightly moving, no doubt providing a silent commentary on the battle. He could see Kagero's right hand move as if it were writing and his left hand move as if it were typing, already making extensive notes about what was going on below. Kurogiri heard an explosion behind them and looked to Kadero to see if he had noticed as well. Considering the only response he got was a barely noticeable gesture in the direction of the noise, Kurogiri was on his own to investigate. He moved from building to building, trying to find the source of the noise, only to find the villains he sent to the zone in various states of disarray. Their clothes were sporting burn marks, or their gear cracked and shattered on the ground. Scorch marks and fist-sized holes could be seen on all the surfaces. Whether those came from the villains or from the students he dropped in here, he couldn't tell. Moving slowly, he delved deeper into the building, following the trail of unconscious bodies on the floor. Eventually, he heard voices. One was loud and abrasive to the ears, the other cheerful and reassuring. Fading into the shadows, Kurogiri moved himself into the room to get a look at the people inside. Is this really what villains are like? They're so damn weak, the loud voice yelled out, belonging to a teen with spiky, ash-blonde hair. It's not manly to talk down on people, bro, the other responded, this one with bright red hair in a ridiculous fashion, especially if they're not here, or well, awake to defend themselves. It's not talking down if it's true. You go do whatever, I'm gonna find that missed fucker. He was the one who brought them here, so he's probably the one to bring them out. Shouldn't we look around the zone for an exit? Or try to regroup? I'm worried about the others. From what I saw during the battle trials, not everyone is comfortable being in a fight. Didn't you hear what I just said, spiky hair for brains? If you want to worry about the others and go help them, then go. Kurogiri was getting a headache listening to the conversation when he noticed something on the wall. It appears that one of the villains has a camouflage ability and was sneaking to get an attack in. Listen good, 'cause I'm not gonna repeat myself again. You wanna save the others? Go save the others, I'm gonna. The camouflage villain took their chance and jumped in. Without missing a beat, the blonde stuck his hand out and released a little explosion. The smoke cleared to show the villain covered in soot. I'm gonna find the misty shit. You wanna stick together? Then keep up? Kurogiri felt like watching them any further was a waste of time. He was about to portal back to Kadero when he found himself in the middle of an explosion, being blown outside. The blonde landed on top of him, his hand on the metal bracer around his neck, releasing little pops in warning. Found you, the blonde growled, an almost manic smile on his face. Kurogiri's eyes squinted a little as he attempted to open a portal below him, but he felt the pops get stronger. Hup bee, no moving misty bitch. I don't know what this is, but it seems kinda important. You move in any way I don't like, and I'll blow you to bits. The redhead finally caught up to them. Dude, are you alright? We were walking out and then is that the warp guy? How did you find him so fast? So manly. For whatever reason, Purple Punk's portals make the air in the area a little colder. When we were in the room, I felt the temperature drop, so I knew he was close. I just didn't know where exactly until Foggy here tried to leave. The blonde leaned in. So, you shitty fog machine, where's your boss at? At being mentioned, a figure turned around to look at the scene. The two teens noticed they weren't alone where they landed. The building they were in previously overlooked the one that Kadero was originally transported to. After the explosion, they landed right behind Kadero. I'm right here, Kadero replied. Kurogiri, you let yourself be captured? I'm disappointed. Kurogiri answered, my apologies Kadero Shigaraki, the loud blonde is far more perceptive than I could have guessed. He got the better of me. A bigger puff of fire escaped from Kagero's mask, unfortunate. You, brat, what do you want? Briefly stunned at the incredible stroke of luck, the blonde didn't respond immediately. Huh? What do I want? What do you want, lizard face? You came in here guns blazing with. Villains up the ass. For what? You're just gonna get beat anyway. Hey, bro? You might not want to antagonize him. I'm getting a bad feeling just being in the area as him. The redhead tried to reel the other back, but he wouldn't listen. I've got the leverage here. He released more crackles into the bracer. Without Cloudy Boy, the villains can't leave, and All Might's here. They have no chance. Kadero nodded, all good points, but I do need my warp gate back. So again, brat, what do you want? Give up. No. Are you blind too? I'm in control of this situation. Give up. Kadero stayed quiet, studying the boy. The boy's quirk is explosion, or something related given what I saw, heard, and the grenade-shaped gauntlet. Quirk is focused around the hands, but what causes the explosions? There's always some kind of catalyst. He looked closely at the boy, noting how he was significantly sweatier than the other. He took a deep breath in from his nose and caught scent of something sweet. Sweet? Not black powder, that would have been obvious. Maybe the sweat? But no, sweat doesn't smell sweet, not even the best deodorant can stop the stench. Nitroglycerin? That could pass as sweat, but that's odorless. So maybe it's something like that? The blonde watched as Kadero seemed to freeze, unsure of what to do. Kagero's gaze was still piercing him, tracing him up and down. Lizard brain. I'm talking to you. Lifting his right hand, he released more mini-explosions. The sudden sound seemed to bring Kadero back, his eyes regaining the intensity they had before. Make me. Caught off guard by the sudden switch of personality, the blonde let out a confused, "What? Make me give up? You said it yourself, you've got the power. So why don't you use that power to make me give up?" Kadero egged him on, "Or maybe you're not as strong as you think you are?" The blonde tried to hide his reaction, but still flinched at the implication. Underneath Kadero's mask, he was smirking. Bingo. The blonde raised his right palm as Kadero was emptying his lungs. "I'll show you who's weak." The blonde let loose a large explosion, but just as it came out, it suddenly fizzled away. What? Kurogiri took advantage of the confusion and portaled out from under him, reappearing next to Kadero once again. Kadero was taking a deep breath in, smoke pouring out from his mouth. The redhead's eyes widened in realization, tackling the blonde as he activated his quirk, shielding them both. "See you around, hirelings," Kadero gasped out, finally releasing his breath. What came out was a massive stream of fire, completely blanketing the teenagers and the entire zone behind them. Shimura, Azui, and Mineta finally made it to the entrance of the USJ, regrouping with the others there. The pink-skinned girl was the first to notice them. "Guys? You made it! Thank God!" Hearing the exclamation, the others hurried to receive the others, gently picking up Aizawa and laying him next to 13. "I'm so glad you're all alright," the girl in the pink and blue bodysuit yelled, her brown bangs shaking back and forth. "Shoji-kun told us you made it out but were stuck down there. You must have been terrified." Tsu hugged the girl. "Achigun, we were lucky to get out of there. The villain was about to attack us, but Aizawa-sensei saved us at the last second." Achiko tried to stop the tears from coming, but couldn't, instead choosing to bury her head into the crook of her friend's neck. The tape-armed teen walked up and placed his arm around Shimura, who was still clutching his hand, the other on Mineta's shoulder. "Are you two all right? I mean, you faced down that big scary thing, right? What happened?" Mineta was first to respond. "It was crazy. We were just sitting behind the bush, hearing the masked villain talk about leaving, and then boom." He raised his hands in exaggeration. "He was right on top of us. I thought for sure we were gonna die. And then Shimura went crazy and tried touching the villain, but then the big black thing dash." "Nomu," Shimura supplied numbly. "But then the big black Nomu thing was right there, and then Shimura was touching it. It was super gross, and the Nomu thing started screaming, and then it started healing itself, and then All Might was there. And now we're here." At the end of Mineta's recap, he was hyperventilating from the lack of breathing. Everyone listened in, nodding and crying as they heard what the trio went through. Shimura just stood still, holding his broken hand close to his chest while staring at the other. The teen with big lips and in the yellow costume awkwardly cut in, "But at least All Might's here now, right? We'll be good until the other heroes get here." Shoji maintained vigilance as he was watching the fight between All Might and Nomu, reporting what he saw. At the start it looked like All Might was losing, but the Nomu is on the back foot now. All Might is giving it way more blows than taking any. Small cheers came up from the gathered students. "That was a big blow. I think the Nomu is done for." From down in the pavilion, the students could hear the final blows of the fight. Plus, Ultra. With a resounding boom, the Nomu was sent flying in the air, through the dome of the USJ. At the same time, a bright light and explosion brought everyone's attention to the collapsed zone. They all gasped in horror as it was covered in a wave of fire so intense they could feel it. Shoji collapsed to his knees, the others looking to him and waiting to hear what happened. That's where Bakugo and Kirishima were. Everyone else followed suit, falling to their knees and let out a disheartening wail. All Might's victory against the Nomu was hard-fought but unfortunately short-lived. All Might landed the finishing blow on the Nomu, launching it through the USJ roof, but he had no time to celebrate or take a break. He felt the wave of heat before seeing it and followed the sound of the explosion. What greeted his eyes worried him to the core. One of the zones was on fire, and it wasn't the one that's supposed to be. All Might turned and leapt, crossing the distance from the pavilion to the collapsed zone in a single bound. All Might landed on the same building Shigaraki and Kurogiri were on, but there was no one in sight. All Might clapped his hands together hard, releasing a shock wave of wind, blowing out the fires. Curled up on the ground before him, he saw two bodies, one clearly attempting to shield the other. The former's skin had boils on the back while the latter looked relatively unharmed save for the reddened skin. All Might's heart sank at the realization that his students had to fight for their lives so early in their careers. All Might moved forward, attempting to separate the two to better assess their injuries, but found the grip to be locked. All Might gulped heavily, "Please still be alive." He raised two fingers to the students' necks, desperately praying for a pulse. When he felt a response in both, foregoing any attempt at being gentle, he picked the two up together and jumped to the entrance, depositing them along with the others. Taking a head count, All Might only counted 8 students, 10 including the 2 he just brought over. He turned around, scanning the rest of the zones, trying to calculate how much time he had left before changing, but immediately cringed. "What am I thinking? The students' safety comes first, I'll just have to push through." "Students," he commanded, "does anyone know where the rest of your classmates are?" Shoji replied in a subdued tone, "I know for a fact there are people in the mountain zone, and most likely the landslide, but I don't know how many are in each. I'm also sure there are some in the downpour and conflagration." "Thank you, young Shoji." All Might nodded and leapt off again, in search for anyone else. "Shojin," Achiko sniffled, Do you know where the villains are?" All Might didn't say anything about them when he came back with Bakugo-kun and Kirishima-kun, so they must be gone. "Are they still?" Shoji attempted to get up but felt a hand on his shoulder, a pinky raised up. "There's no need to look," Shimura answered instead. He lifted his pointer finger and placed his pinky back down, pointing forward. "They're right there." Everyone followed the direction of his finger and saw the 2 villains in front of the fountain, the masked one sitting lazily on its edge while the mist one standing at attention next to him. They all cowered under the masked villain's gaze, but no one moved. Shimura looked back down at them, holding his gaze before taking a step forward. He felt something wrap around his good arm. "Whoa man, where do you think you're going?" Tape Elbow asked. "I'm going to go talk to them," he replied, wishing his other hand wasn't broken so he could decay the strand of tape. "You know, bad idea. Out of everyone here, you know what he can do. Not calling you weak or anything, but you don't stand a chance. You're still injured. Let me go, Shiro-kun. Because I know what he can do, it has to be me." Tsu spoke up, "But why you, Shimura-kun? What are you going to do? What if he kills you?" He looked back and answered resolutely, "He won't." "How do you know that?" "Because he hasn't killed anyone yet. That doesn't mean he won't change his mind." "But you ignored my questions. Why you and what are you going to do?" Shimura stared into Tsu's eyes, searching for something but couldn't find it. His left hand found its way to his neck and started scratching. "Arg, I don't know. I just feel like I need to do something. I had it. The Nomu, I could have stopped this attack from going any further if I wasn't such a wimp. I feel so weak just staying here when there's something I know I can do." "Shimura-kun, if you're thinking about doing what I think you are, then you'd be the same as them. The villain knows what you can do too. Do you really think he'll let you try?" The pink-skinned girl chimed in with a raised hand. Guys? Care to let the rest of us know what's going on? He almost defeated the Nomu, and is thinking about trying again with the villain, Mina-chan." Tsu replied bluntly. Mina didn't appear to understand, knitting her eyebrows together in confusion, but everyone else caught the underlying message. Before it could completely settle in their minds, Shimura attempted to ease their worries, shaking his hands wildly. "Tsu-chan, everyone know. I wouldn't do that. Never. They're just sitting there. We should be doing something to apprehend them." "Shimura," a tired voice cut through. The students turned their heads, surprised to see Aizawa sitting up, the wounds on his face no longer gushing blood. "We'll talk about that later, but everyone else is right. You going down there for whatever reason is beyond irrational. No one is leaving this platform for any reason. Shiro, if anybody attempts to leave, tape them down." The boy nodded. "Now, tell me everything that's happened." All Might arrived at the mountain zone to find 3 of his students. One, a blonde boy with a black lightning bolt design on his hair, was a clear hostage. The other 2 were both girls. The taller one was wearing a red bodysuit with yellow trim, her black hair up in a spiky ponytail while the shorter was wearing what looked like a biker's outfit, her purple hair in a short bob with 2 longer bangs framing her face. They had their hands up in surrender, but upon seeing him, both girls gave a relieved smile. "What are you two smiling at?" the skull-masked villain asked confused. "You that happy your classmate's about to get fried. You know, that's pretty messed up for kids wanting to be a hero." The girl in the biker outfit smirked. "Nah, we're just so happy that All Might's here." The skull-masked villain's eyes widened, he turned around and came face to chest with All Might. His grip on the boy released out of shock. "All Might?" All Might simply pounded his fist on the villain's head and he was out cold. He immediately picked up the boy in his left arm and the other two in the other. "I apologize for being so rough with the handling, but I need to move quickly," he explained as he carried them out of the mountain zone. "I'm bringing you to this zone's emergency room. You are to stay there until you are retrieved by another hero." The girl with the spiky ponytail replied through being jostled. "All Might? Or the others?" "A group of the others are currently at the entrance of the facility, and I'm going around the other zones to find everyone else. This was the last zone I had to check." "Are they safe?" "Yes. Fortunately, your classmates were able to handle the villains in their zones. From what I saw, you 3 were the only ones that ran into that sort of problem." The girl looked down, disappointed. "I see." At this point, they all arrived at the emergency room. It was situated off to the side, set in one of the caves, looking more like a doomsday bunker than anything else. All Might gently placed the teens down and kneeled in front of the girl with the spiky ponytail. "Young Yaoyorozu, please do not look down on yourself. You were thrust into a situation that should never have happened on your 3rd day of high school, and despite having slightly more trouble than your classmates, you, young Kaminari, and young Jiro all performed admirably. So please, instead of thinking I was so weak, or I'm not ready, or I wasn't good enough, take what happened here and use it as motivation to get better and stronger. Remember what it was like so that you or anyone else will never have to feel that way again." Yaoyorozu's eyes teared up as she nodded. "I will, sir." "Thank you." All Might gave her one of his famous smiles. "Wonderful. Now please stay here until you are retrieved by another hero. They should be close, but the main villains are still out there." "Wait," Jiro cut in, "you mean that big boom earlier wasn't you beating them?" All Might shook his head. "Unfortunately no. That was more of a diversion. The real villains are still out there. Go kick their asses, All Might." All Might grinned cheekily and gave her a thumbs up before closing the door. Kadero was still sitting on the fountain, watching the group at the entrance intently. He saw one kid attempt to walk down the steps, Shimura-chan, but was brought back by someone out of view. He would be lying if he said he wasn't disappointed about seeing it happen. "I wonder what's going on in their minds," Kadero wondered aloud. Kurogiri paused for a second, debating on if it was a rhetoric question or not. "How do you mean?" "I mean, just think about it." Kadero sat up, explaining further. "That one heroling that got out, he left how long ago? 20-30 minutes maybe?" Kurogiri hummed. "I get that not all heroes are as fast as All Might, but they're sure taking their sweet time. According to the info we got earlier, this facility is around 3 kilometers away from the main campus. It takes the average person around 20 minutes to run that far, 15-ish if they're in shape, and even less than that if they're taking a vehicle or some other form of movement or have a speed quirk. Besides that, the doors are wide open thanks to All Might, and none of them are even attempting to leave. I get that these are students, but they're severely lacking in common logic. The hell are they waiting for?" "I could ask the same of you, Kajiro Shigaraki," Kurogiri shot back. "All Might defeated the Nomu, both 13 and Eraserhead are still alive, all the villains we brought along have been defeated, and to my knowledge, none of the heralings were killed or otherwise seriously injured, even the 2 we ran into. Why are we still here if we have been defeated so thoroughly?" Kajiro stood up and stretched his arms above his head. "And that, Kurogiri, is you misunderstanding the purpose of the attack. We came here to land a blow against the heroes, sure, but killing them? That was never the plan." Kajiro was now in Kurogiri's face, his eyes gleaming. "No, killing them only creates more, kind of like the Hydra from Greek mythology. You take off one head, 2 more grow back. The same principle could be said for heroes. Kurogiri's eyes narrowed. It almost sounds as if you want the heroes to get better. Does your loyalty truly lie with Master? Don't try to take that tone with me, Kurogiri, Kadero replied, his voice taking a dangerous edge, puffs of fire escaping his mouth. Just because my expectations for this attack doesn't match yours, it doesn't mean I'm disobeying or betraying Master, not in the slightest. Anybody worth their salt could kill a hero should they so choose, and anybody that isn't stupid can kill a teenager. Then why leave them alive? Because killing them is too easy. No, I want to shake them to their core, I want to haunt their dreams, I want to break them. Kurogiri backed off slightly, off-put by the intensity of Kadero's words. You've been around Master longer than I have, so you tell me. What does Master love doing more than finding and taking quirks? Building up hope before crushing it completely, Kurogiri answered eventually. Exactly, Kadero nodded. Master doesn't take quirks or kill people immediately, he plays with his prey beforehand, lulling them into thinking they're safe and then yanking the rug out from under them. Even then, sometimes he doesn't kill them. He lets them go, letting them live out the rest of their lives in fear. So no, Kurogiri. Killing them is far from what I want to do. I want them to know that they aren't at the top of the food chain, that heroes aren't untouchable, that they can be broken. If, after this, we find out that there are new or missing faces, then that means I got to them. If they're the same, then that means that the game is still on. It'll take some time, but I will win. Kurogiri studied Kadero before relenting. Very well. I still do not understand why we're still here, though. The heroes are surely seconds away at this point, and despite our best efforts, I'm not sure we can defeat All Might and whoever else is arriving. Kadero sighed heavily. To be honest, I wanted to see how UA responds and who they could scrounge up in an emergency. The rat's paws are in a lot of plates, I'm sure of it, so I wanted to get an idea of the breadth of his influence. But you're right, we can't afford to stay here any longer. I guess we'll have to find out some other time. Open a portal, I'll cover our escape. A portal opened behind them as Kadero conjured 2 balls of fire on his hands. He took a deep breath in, causing the flames in his hands to reduce to nothing. At the edge of his vision, he saw a shadow move from the lower left to in front of him, growing in size as whatever it was came closer to the ground. Too slow, number 1. He let out another wave of fire, aimed directly at the group at the top of the stairs. All Might was just exiting the mountain zone when he saw 2 figures standing in front of the fountain in the middle. He crouched down for a jump and leapt, ready to finally put an end to this attack. Still in the air, he saw the figure on the left, who appeared to be Shigaraki, produce balls of fire in his hands as a portal opened behind them. His eyes widened as he realized that they were about to leave. The light emanating from Shigaraki's hands vanished as he saw the makings of another fire-based attack. He turned himself midair, aiming a punch behind him to shoot himself downward faster, hoping to intercept the attack in time. As he grew closer to the ground, he found himself washed in a wave of fire. He aimed another punch at where he thought the villains were, dispelling the fire. Once again, when his vision was clear, he found no one there. Filled with a feeling he hadn't felt since his fight all those years ago, he released an angered yell, "No!" At the entrance at the top of the stairs, an assortment of heroes appeared, poised and ready to fight, but all they were met with was a group of students in various states of shock, 2 heroes in need of medical attention, and the sound of the number 1 hero's cry. One hero stepped forward, clothed in a leather outfit, a set of speakers resting on his neck, and his blonde hair slicked back in a way reminiscent of a mohawk. What happened here? The students didn't even register the hero's arrival nor them being ushered outside where cop cars and ambulances were strewn about, all still too caught up in the fact that All Might, the symbol of peace, the number 1 hero looked like he lost the fight. Their minds all rationalized that he did fight and beat arguably the most dangerous villain there, but their hearts knew that that wasn't the villain that they had to worry about. That villain, the Nomu, wasn't the one that orchestrated the attack, wasn't the one that attacked them, it wasn't even the one there from the beginning. No, that honor was held for the villain in the dragon mask, the one who set ablaze a disaster zone made of rock, the one who took down a pro-hero single-handedly and with ease, the one who taunted All Might like they were playing games on a playground. Shimura was sat on the back of an ambulance, completely unmoving. He was vaguely aware of the paramedic fidgeting his hand around so that it could be properly set and healed, but thought nothing of it. His thoughts still bringing him back inside, where the villain looked at him with those cold, green eyes. "And you were willing to use it on an enemy combatant when it's clear you could kill with a single touch?" he said. "Are you sure you want to be a hero?" Shimura looked over the area. His classmates were huddled in small groups or being checked out like he was. All of them fought for their lives today, so why don't they look more worried? Is it because they weren't even in any danger because they're already so strong? Am I that weak? It can't be. I almost beat that Nomu. I doubt anyone else could have done that. Shimura-san. And those villains, it's clear that the dragon-masked one was way stronger than the others, so why didn't he have that thing kill me? Why didn't he kill All Might? But the way he looked at me, he was impressed. What could he? Shimura-san, he snapped to attention as the paramedic tried talking with him. Shimura-san, we've done everything we could for your hand at this point in time, but you'll have to be moved to get it healed completely, and to be sure that you'll still be able to use your quirk properly. He nodded numbly, right? Are we going to the hospital? Then? We've been instructed to bring all the injured back to the school to be looked at by your nurse. If you're ready, we can head over immediately. Yeah, let's go. Shimura followed the paramedic to the front of the ambulance and sat down in the front seat. Through the window he could see that the paramedic was checking in with whoever was in charge. The ride back to campus was short, not giving the paramedic enough time to ask the questions he knows he wants to. Shimura was thankful for it, opting to stare out the window as he was still absorbed in his thoughts. Why did that villain look at me like that? Was I really going to kill him before that Nomu got in the way? Why do I feel so weak? Still inside, Nezu and two others were observing the destruction the attack caused. The only major damage they could see was collateral damage from All Might's fight against the Nomu, and whatever happened in the collapsed zone. At any other point, the damage would have been the focus, but that's not what they were assessing. It appears there is a lapse in our school's security that evaded even me, Nezu spoke, breaking the almost solemn silence. To think that villains were able to bypass the alarms and have total access to this facility is troubling. The hero on his right, with long dark purple hair, clad in a thin white bodysuit with a black leather corset and a set of broken handcuffs on each wrist added on, not to mention they also have access to a warper. Teleportation quirks are rare enough as it is, but to think one is aligned with villains? It's giving me shivers, and not in the fun way. Nezu stayed quiet as he studied her face, unfamiliar with the emotion that flashed on it. Looking back down, he couldn't help but wonder if there were other things that he had overlooked. How many times must his students and staff pay the price for his carelessness? Once had better be enough. All Might was sitting in the teacher's lounge once again, replaying the events in his head, thinking about what he could have done better, what he could do next time, when he heard the door slide open. He immediately puffed up to look at the newcomer to find a familiar face. "Pardon the intrusion," the man said. "I heard from Recovery Girl that you might be here." Naomesa? All Might deflated back into his small form, ushering him into a room that had a lock. "It's no problem, please." All Might led Naomesa into another room, gesturing to the couch as he set some tea out for them. Naomesa Tsukauchi was a plain-faced man with dark hair and eyes, dressed in a tan trench coat with a matching hat. All Might always joked that he looked just like the detectives in the old black and white period pieces, but instead of denying it, Naomesa just laughed along with it. Naomesa placed his hat on the table before starting. "I'd like to start off by asking you about—" "Sorry, but tell me about the students first," All Might interrupted, his hands raised to stop him. "Are they all right? What about Aizawa-kun and 13-san? Always the hero first, huh?" Naomesa chuckled lightly. "Let's see. In that order, all of the students minus the two you picked up from the collapse zone and Shimura-kun are in good health. They all just had minor bruises and cuts, most likely from," he paused to check his notes, "from falling through the warp gate, and from fighting whatever villains they came across. And before you worry about that, all of the villains in the zones are clocked in at D-listers or below, petty criminals and the sorts. The two main villains are currently listed at A ranks as they're previously unknown but were able to successfully infiltrate, attack UA, and escape, and the one you fought hasn't been given a designation yet as you're the only one who can speak on their behalf. The 2 students you picked up were treated for 2nd and 3rd degree burns but are expected to have minimal scarring. Shimura-kun's hand was thankfully healed all the way after Recovery Girl got to it, and initial testing shows his quirk is still functional, but he's scheduled to check in at a later date to see if any problems arise. All Might heaved a sigh, relief flushing over him. That's very good. It would have been a shame to have his career as a hero be cut short. Agreed. As for Aizawa, he got off relatively easily. A few cracked ribs and some facial scarring from the attack. We're not entirely sure if his quirk was damaged since they sorta wrapped his head up all the way. Well, perhaps he'll finally look the part of being a mummy then. All Might gave a light laugh. Naomasa paused, his mouth hung open. All Might. You've never made a joke that funny before. I can't take all the credit. Everyone from the students to the teachers here say Aizawa-kun looks like a mummy, what with his capture weapon wrapped around him. Having regained his composure, Naomasa continued his report, peering at his notes as he goes along. 13 was probably the most injured out of everyone. Their suit was completely destroyed from having their quirk turned against them, as well as a portion of their actual body. It's nothing too serious, but they will be out of commission for a little longer. Needless to say, given the reports I'm hearing about the leader of the attack, Kadero Shigaraki, everyone being relatively unharmed is nothing short of luck. All Might's expression darkened at this. I don't believe it to be luck at all. Realizing he was about to get All Might's statement, he pulled out a recorder, silently asking for permission to record everything. All Might nodded and took a deep breath. All Might settled more comfortably in his chair, regaling Naomasa on the events of the day from his morning saving people, the talk he had with Nezu, arriving at the Yusei, and finally his fight with the Nomu. He paused at this point to better collect his thoughts. When the silence lasted a few beats longer than expected, Naomasa prompted him, All Might. What do you have to say about your fight with the Nomu? Naomasa could see conflict in his eyes, something that is rarely ever seen on the hero, which only deepened his worries. When All Might spoke again, it wasn't with words but with sign language. Naomasa's eyes widened as All Might finished gesturing. I'm going to omit parts of this fight, mainly about Shigaraki. After, I'll come back and tell you. Off the record, he signed. With the little hiccup out of the way, All Might recapped his talk with Shigaraki before the actual fight started, and against his better judgment, he told the detective about the Nomu having multiple quirks. I'm sorry, pause there for a second. Naomasa interrupted. You are saying that the creature, this, Nomu, has multiple quirks, correct? Correct. All Might nodded grimly. You are familiar with young Shimura's quirk, right? At the start of my fight, young Shimura mentioned it has super regeneration, as he touched it for a prolonged period of time, but when released it healed completely. He saw this quirk in action prior to my engagement, and this Shigaraki confirmed it. When my men recovered the Nomu from wherever you launched it to, we all thought it was a mutant type. I can't speak for its appearance, but I can confirm that it has super regeneration and shock absorption. It hit hard as well, so maybe a strength quirk as well, but I can't confirm that. When I was given a free chance to attack, I hit it with enough strength to level a city block and the beast didn't move 1 centimeter. It felt like all the power I had in the punch simply became nothing. The way you worded it suggests you believe that there is more to this Nomu than the 2 quirks. Can you expand on that? Without speaking negatively of those with mutation quirks, its entire appearance screamed like it was made in a lab. Very well, and you said that the leader, Shigaraki, confirmed the Nomu's quirks? Yes, he told me outright that its quirks were super regeneration and shock absorption. All Might continued his story, with Naomasa's expression getting more and more grim. When he finally reached the end, both men settled into an uncomfortable silence. Naomasa stopped recording when All Might was finished, but made no move to continue with the parts that All Might left out. He looked to the teacup All Might set in front of him and took a massive swig, shuddering lightly. Tashinori, I almost don't want to ask, but at this point I need to know. What exactly didn't you tell me? Naomasa groaned out, dropping all formalities. All Might was completely splayed out on his chair, his head resting on the back, staring at the ceiling. The leader, Shigaraki, he reminds me of him. Naomasa sat up straight, his eyes focused once again. Are you sure? You said that you defeated him. And I believe I did. All Might replied, now sitting properly again, but from how he acted, it was almost like I was back on the battlefield with him. Shigaraki, he was completely relaxed and nonchalant the entire time. He didn't take any of it seriously, like he knew he'd win if he actually fought. When that Nomu had me pinned, he didn't go for a killing blow like others would. He taunted me when I was down, laughed when I failed, enjoyed seeing me squirm. And not to mention the fact that he apparently has access to someone or has the ability to transfer quirks to another being. The picture he's painting isn't a pretty one. Naomasa shook his head in clear denial. The picture you're painting isn't a good one either, Toshinori. Are you saying that he has a successor? Or that he's somehow involved with all of this? I'm not saying any of this, but I can't think of any other good explanations. He may not have been the one I was fighting, but Shigaraki was in control of the fight the whole time. He knew it and flaunted it. The Nomu was clearly an experiment of sorts. Its strength was unnatural, and given the quirks it had, it was most likely made to fight me specifically. Shock absorption to tank the hits I can give, and super regeneration to heal any damage that I could have inflicted on it. I know I defeated him, but who else could have created something like this? And I'm not just talking about the Nomu. I've run into my fair share of villains over my career, but only he and Shigaraki have made me feel almost inadequate. The similarities between the two are too close to be a simple coincidence. Toshinori, breathe, Naomasa placated. I can't speak to how much this guy has affected you, but I do know that you're not one to lie down and take whatever this is. I know, he shouted, immediately backing down. I'm sorry for my outburst, but this Shigaraki, he's in another league entirely, I just know it. We met for not even 5 minutes, but he's left a lasting impression on me. That's not an easy feat. Naomasa sighed, rubbing his temples. If it'll give you any peace of mind, I'll personally look into this matter and see if I can't prove that he really is back. I'll also request some lab work be done on the Nomu to see if I can verify its origins. But Toshinori, I can't imagine what you must be feeling right now, but you're not alone in this fight. I and so many others have your back, and I promise you I'll do everything I can to bring this guy in. All Might took a deep breath, shook his head and stood up. Naomasa did the same, walking together to the door. Thank you, Naomasa. I truly appreciate the work you do. I pray that my worries are just those, but in the off chance, please be careful. I will. Naomasa gave him a warm smile. You should probably visit Shimura-kun and the rest of the class. I'm sure they could use a little pick-me-up. A disheveled man walked the halls of UA, following a route that's been walked multiple times before by countless people in the past. The man was dressed in a loose black outfit, walking with his hands in his pockets, face wrapped in bandages and his long black hair tied up in a loose bun, much different than how he usually wears it. The halls were empty and quiet, but the man didn't mind it in the slightest, preferring it this way than how it usually is. Eventually he made it to his destination, walking right up to the door without breaking his stride as it opened before him. The room is fairly standard. 2 couches face each other in the middle of the room with a dark oak coffee table between them. Beyond that was a desk, made of the same material, facing the door, with Principal Nezu sitting on a lush black chair behind it. The man walked around and sat himself on the back of the couch closest to the desk. Aizawa-kun, I'm glad to see you moving about so quickly. I heard that recovery girl was generous with the healing, Nezu greeted cheerfully. Aizawa grunted in acknowledgement. The old lady basically healed me fully but insisted I wear the bandages. Such a waste of supplies. Yes, she does tend to go overboard for aftercare, but her heart is always in the right place. What do you have for me? Unfortunately, not as much as I would like, Aizawa drawled on. I engaged the leader, whom I'm being told is called Kadero Shigaraki, at the start of the attack. To my disappointment, I was taken out quickly and efficiently, and was kept down for the rest of the time. I eventually came to in time to see Shimura attempt to go confront the villains. Oh, I knew that there was an argument of sorts, but I wasn't aware that this was the case. I don't know what to make of it, but there was something in Shimura's eyes that didn't belong there. It almost looked like he was wanting to prove something, whether that's to himself or someone else, I'm not sure. Regardless, I think we should monitor him more closely, as well as have him and the rest of the class visit a counselor. Agreed. I'm also aware that a few of your students had extremely close calls thanks to Shigaraki, so it's best to address any lingering issues immediately. Aizawa grunted again. And what do you make of the leader? I'm going to hold off on my full report for tomorrow so I won't have to repeat myself, but my preliminary is that he's dangerous, much more than any other villains we've come to face recently. Without waiting for a dismissal, Aizawa walked back out the door, leaving Nezu alone in his office. He hopped off his chair and turned to face out the window, clasping his paws behind his back. The sun was already going down, painting the sky in a beautiful orange hue. What are you going to do now? Nezu wondered aloud. Kadero Shigaraki? Kadero walked down a dimly lit corridor, lightly stretching, his back popping a few times. He was dressed in a loose-fitting and wide-necked gray t-shirt, slim-fitting black pants with the legs pin-rolled, and dark green athletic shoes quietly smacking with every step. Turning down another corridor, he came to face stairs leading down with a door at the bottom. Beyond the door was a decently sized bar, the counter in an L shape with a wall of bottles backlit in amber light. There were red-topped stools with a low back lined up at the bar, with booths situated behind them. At the end of the counter sat a small TV screen, displaying the light snow of electronic static. Kurogiri stood behind the bar and poured Kadero a glass as he sat down on one of the stools, silently sliding it in front of him. Kadero nodded, swirling the glass around, smelling the liquor within. Bourbon? Scotch, Kurogiri corrected. Single malt? Highland? Kadero let out an annoyed TSK but took a sip anyway. The TV screen blinked, no longer showing static but a black screen, indicating the presence on the other side to be present. A voice crackled to life, sounding over the speakers. I hope you have a more detailed report regarding your attack, Kadero, seeing as you chose to postpone it. Kadero placed his glass down, spinning in his chair so he was facing the TV fully. I wanted to postpone the meeting to see if I could recover the Nomu before the police or heroes got their hands on it, but by the time I found it, the police already had it in a maiden. I don't know where exactly it is, but I can take a guess as to where it was transported to and spring it. An unfortunate loss, but it's nothing we can't recover from. If we need it again you can do so, but don't bother with it for now. I'm assuming you have data from its fight? Of course. Kadero reached into his pocket and grabbed a thumb drive, showing it off to the unseen camera. That was another reason why I wanted to wait longer. I know how the doctor is picky about being accurate, he said with air quotes, and it was difficult to quantify it, but that should be good enough. He tossed the drive to Kurogiri, who motionlessly created a portal, sending it off. What of your personal account? Kadero took another sip of the scotch, letting out a sigh before continuing. As you know, we launched an attack against UA. The purpose of the attack was to unsettle and shake the heroes. The schedule that we dash. Why didn't you kill any of the heroes that were there? The voice interrupted. Kurogiri tells me you had ample opportunity to kill a few students as well as Eraserhead. Kadero glared at Kurogiri, who ignored it as he picked up his glass and started cleaning it. Kadero didn't respond immediately, choosing his words carefully. I don't believe killing heroes, or killing in general, will help us in the long run. That's still not to say I won't do it should the need ever arise. Taking the quietness as a sign to continue, he gulped, trying to hide his obvious unease. Master, I am to be your successor, yes? He received nothing in reply again, moving forward. If I am to be the next symbol of evil, I can't do things that close-minded. He closed his eyes and took deep breaths, knowing full well the things he said are borderline treasonous. They were too close to doubt, too close to insulting, and too close to being an outright denial. Kurogiri. A portal opened in front of Kadero, who looked at it worriedly. He knew exactly where the portal went and what it meant. He sighed heavily before walking through. When he re-emerged, he found himself in the warehouse. The portal didn't drop him off directly in front of Master, but in the middle of rows of tanks. Thick wires and tubes were running along the floor, each feeding into their respective places. The tanks themselves show suspended figures in various forms of development, some being as small as a fetus, others fully grown into hulking or lanky figures. Each one displayed a different Nomu, no one the same as the last. Kadero weaved around the wires with practiced ease, making his way to the back corner of the warehouse where he knew was expected. When he got to his destination, he paused before the door before him, the last thing that was separating him between him and his master beyond. Taking one more deep breath, he stepped forward and turned the knob. He was immediately engulfed in a wave of pain. His body collapsed at the intensity of it, his limbs were uncooperative as he tried to fight through it, willing himself to not make a noise to show any further weakness. "Master," he rasped out, "please, I meant no disrespect when I said that." He was on his knees at this point, weakly reaching a hand towards the source. The back of the chair was still facing him, but the pain didn't stop. "Master, I can explain. Please, allow me this." After what felt like another hour of this, the pain suddenly stopped. He collapsed onto all fours as he tried to catch his breath, heaving heavily. As the pain subsided, he slowly stood back up, wiping the drool from his mouth and the sweat off his face. "Master Dash," he started, a raised hand stopping him. The figure in the chair turned around to face him. He was dressed in a black suit and white dress shirt, top buttons undone, but his outfit was the only thing almost normal about the man. His head was bald, his face lacking the prominent features of a nose and eyes, his ears just little mounds where they should be, in their place was terribly scarred skin. Tubes were stuck into his throat, facilitating his breathing, giving the voice of the man an almost mechanical tone to it. "I don't allow such insolence to be spoken in my presence, Kadero," he spoke. "Are you suggesting that I am close-minded? That I'm as simple as the common thief? That I am but a shadow of my former self? No, master, never." Kadero responded, "I am saying that killing heroes wouldn't change things how we want." Again he was met with silence, and again he slowed himself down, carefully forming his explanation. "I mentioned this to Kurogiri, and considering you know I didn't kill any heroes, you probably already know this, but I don't want to kill the heroes. Killing heroes is easy enough. I could ambush them and slit their throat before they could react, or hire a semi-competent hitman to get the job done, but there's nothing more to it. You came to power through overwhelming force and controlling the underground with an iron fist and fear, and I want to do the same. Killing heroes spreads fear, but it's superficial at best. It just makes them more cautious, and the only attention it garners from the underground is a sense of respect in villains whose only goal is to kill or destroy. What is the problem with having strong comrades? In my time I had only 50 people behind me, and it was enough to take down the government and destabilize the country for a period. Master, with all due respect, raw power isn't everything. Surely you could agree to that. You have all of the power in the world, no one can stand up to you, but you don't flaunt it about. You prefer to hide in the shadows and bide your time. You like to play the long game because you know that there is fun in pulling the strings. Be mindful of your next words, Kadero, he rumbled out. Kadero gulped. He knew that he was at the edge of his master's patience, but he needed to get his point through if he wanted to succeed. Master, if killing heroes was your goal, you would have showed up at the hero commissions headquarters and destroyed it. Then you would have went to every hero school from the big ones like UA to any small school that had the slightest mention of a heroics program in the works and done the same. You would have raised Japan to nothing, but you didn't. Because with everything destroyed, there would be nothing left to rule. The longer he spoke, the more he felt his tongue loosen. He felt power in confidence in standing his ground. I want the heroes to fear me like how children fear from monsters under the bed. I want them to know that the only reason they're alive is because I'm the one who allows it. If I kill every hero I come across, my message won't get spread, my influence won't grow. No, I needed those hero students, and Eraserhead, and 13, and All Might alive so that they could spread the word that I am coming. I will do anything I have to accomplish my dream." At the end of his spiel, Kadero stayed quiet, maintaining his gaze on where his master's eyes would be. His hands were flexing in preparation for a possible attack, with smoke already pooling at the corners of his lips. The next few moments would be critical, and if played out wrong, he would be in for more pain than before. His master looked at him impassively. The only sign of movement was a slight tapping of his finger on the arm rest and the slow breaths. Without warning and faster than he could react, his master shot his hand out, placing it over his head. Kadero tensed, expecting pain or maybe a tug as he fought for his quirk, but instead he felt his hair being ruffled. Confused, he looked up and saw a smile on his master's face. That's what I was looking for, his voice laced with pride. Kadero, I understand why you didn't kill anyone during your attack. Kurogiri explained to me your reasoning for doing so, but I wanted to hear it from you. I needed to hear the conviction and determination in your voice before approving of your plan. Kadero felt his mouth open in confusion. You're not angry with me? But I know what I said. I all but directly insulted you. His master removed his hand from his head, still giving him a smile, because you understood the danger and stood your ground. Heroes, villains, and government officials alike have insulted me, but all cowered in fear the moment I gave them a fraction of my attention. They were all bark and no bite, for lack of better terms. But you didn't back down. I could sense it in your voice, the minute changes in your posture, the heat rising from you. You were ready and willing to attack me if I acted in a way that went against your goals. You found your hill, and you were ready to die on it. Why would I be upset with you when you're finally understanding the lessons I've been teaching you since I brought you under my wing? My hill is what I've built. I wanted to rule Japan, and I do. No, from this point on, I will support you with all that I have. You have my word on the name of All for One. I apologize for keeping you all here after school has been let out, but this is a problem that's better dealt with as soon as possible. Nezu addressed the room. The teachers were sat in a conference room, with the desks situated in a U-shape with Nezu sitting in the middle of the bend. To his right was Eraserhead, on his left, All Might in his deflated form. The other heroes that made it to the USJ filled up the remaining seats. Stood at the top of the U was Detective Tsukauchi, giving his report and acting as facilitator for the meeting. Thank you, he nodded at Nezu. To start, the leader of this attack is called Kadero Shigaraki. According to the statements we've received, we aren't able to pin what his quirk is, but they all agree that it has something to do with fire. There are mixed accounts saying that the fire can be shot from his hands or mouth, but even with this, attempting to find him through the registry will take much longer than we'd like since fire quirks are extremely common. We were also unable to find any matches regarding the warp gate user called Kurogiri. At this time, we're assuming that neither quirks are registered, and the names are most likely aliases, so we're unfortunately at a dead end there. According to the statements as well, it appears that neither Shigaraki or Kurogiri received any injuries throughout the attack, so we unfortunately don't have a possible timetable on when the next attack could be since they're presumably in perfect health. A hero in a gas mask, wearing a red cloak and a hat that made him look like a cowboy spoke up, so we're basically shootin' blind, and I reckon we should be preparing for another attack soon. Damn, if this ain't just a headache, I don't know what is. If it's alright with the rest of you, Tsukauchi cut in, I'd like to hear All Might's and Eraserhead's accounts regarding the attack, seeing as they were the first responders. Unfortunately, 13 is still unavailable to give their statement, but this should provide everyone here a better clue as to what and who we're dealing with. Eraserhead grunted, indicating he'll speak first. The short version of my account is that Shigaraki is exceptionally skilled and far more dangerous than what we're normally used to dealing with. At the shortness of his statement, everyone else looked at him expectantly, wanting more information. He just sighed before continuing. I was there from the very beginning of the attack and unfortunately had minimal contact with him. The majority of my time was spent on taking out the mob of villains they brought out, but I did eventually get to him. Or more accurately, he came to me. He ran at me while I was dealing with a group of villains. I sent out my capture weapon to intercept, but he used it against me, pulling on it so I'd be forced to fight him. It's also worth mentioning that he yanked hard enough to pull me off my feet and through the air. The strength was surprising to say the least, as he didn't look particularly large. He blocked my attack and my shirt sleeve caught fire, presumably from his quirk. He was able to use his quirk on you, Aizawa, the long, purple-haired heroine interrupted, but you're normally so good at keeping them off. Eraserhead sighed again, irritated at being interrupted. Yes, he was able to use his quirk on me, Midnight. In the initial strike, he called me Eraserhead and pointed out that I'm not good for prolonged battle, indicating he knew who I was. It's not a well-known facet of my quirk, and I've never told anybody how my quirk works exactly, but for the sake of this meeting, I will. The longer I use my quirk, any successive use immediately afterwards drops. I can use it for as long as I keep my eyes open, but it'll stop as soon as I blink. I can start it again right afterwards, but there'll be a delay when I can activate it again, and the time it's active will be shorter. It's like being in a staring contest. The longest stare is the one as soon as you start, but once the first blink happens, you won't be able to keep your eyes open for as long. Let's say I use it for 30 seconds. Once I blink, there'll be a delay of 2 seconds before it'll activate again. The next use will be 27 seconds before I blink. Then there'll be a delay of 5 seconds. The numbers are random and I don't know the rate at which the delay increases and usage decreases, but that's essentially how it works. Shigaraki attacked me during that delay. The very fact that he either knew about the weakness or was able to figure it out during battle speaks wonders to his observational skills. In the corner of his eye, he could see Nezu perk up a little. Rolling his eyes, he continued, afterwards, he had me pinned and I was promptly knocked out. When I came to the first time, I noticed that villains with mutant quirks were around me, which shows that he also knows that my quirk won't work on them, and he was attacking Shimura, Azui, and Mineta. I was able to stop the attack but was then knocked out again. When I came to for the second and final time, I was at the top of the stairs, surrounded by a group of students. My contact with Shigaraki was limited, but from the brief encounter I can definitively say that he is smart, tactical, and strong. A horrible combination for a villain to be. The others murmured in agreement, slowly ingesting the new information. Tsukauchi was writing notes down. Thank you for that. All Might? All Might coughed into his hand before speaking. Similar to Aizawa, my contact with Shigaraki was short. I would also like to preface this by saying that this attack felt very focused yet not. I'll expand on this later. Let me just go over my experience first. Everyone nodded, silently shelving their questions. The majority of my time was spent fighting the Nomu, and then afterwards it was ensuring the students still spread out in the disaster zones were safe. The only time we interacted was before my fight with the Nomu started properly. When I first arrived, I took out the remaining villains in the plaza, recovered Aizawa-kun and the students that were down there with him, as well as got a good look at the villain. Tsukauchi took this as his cue and passed out sketches of Shigaraki for the teachers to see. When he spoke to me, I didn't get the same feeling of him being this cold and dangerous villain that we've been hearing about. I can definitely see how they came to that conclusion, but from what I saw, he seemed happy. Ecstatic even, when seeing me in the flesh, whereas the other villains all cowered. A man with white spiky hair, wearing a yellow visor and red and black suit scoffed. So he's a little crazy, that's still within the ballpark of a villain. Well, yes, All Might awkwardly replied, but he didn't seem crazed. His happiness seemed genuine, but then it was like a switch flipped and then he became what we know him as, but I'm getting a little off the point. That's part of what I want to talk about later. When I went to attack Shigaraki directly, he used the Nomu as a shield. I already knew beforehand that it had super regeneration from young Shimura, and when I hit it, it went flying and it ended up a crumpled mess. I went to attack Shigaraki again, but it's what he said that didn't sit well with me. He told it to stop playing around and fight. When my fist connected with it again, nothing happened. It didn't go flying, it felt like I was hitting air almost. And then, Shigaraki told me that it has more than one quirk. At that, everyone stilled, not expecting to hear this. Most notably, Tsukauchi and Nezu looked the palest, a detail that wasn't missed by Eraserhead. The Nomu had me pinned and Shigaraki had me dead to rights. Instead of going for a killing blow like others would have, he let me up and even let me have a free shot to attack the Nomu. Of course I didn't believe him, but at the time I didn't want to risk Shigaraki growing impatient and attacking me alongside the Nomu, so I did as was told. I told Tsukauchi this when I gave my statement, but I aimed a punch at the Nomu with enough strength that would have leveled an entire city block and it didn't budge. Not a bit. He told me that the second quirk the Nomu has was shock absorption. That was the last interaction I had with him. The room settled in an uncomfortable silence as everyone was processing the new information. The silence persisted for a few beats longer before Nezu spoke up, breaking it. So you're saying that Shigaraki is also an emotional manipulator? Everyone gawked at the statement, with surprise shown most on the face of present Mike, the hero clad in a leather outfit and long yellow hair. His gaze moved between All Might and Nezu, his eyes begging for either of them to explain. Nezu brought his elbows onto the desktop, clasping his paws and rest his chin on them. All Might described Shigaraki as having a switch to his personality, which in and of itself isn't too concerning as everyone here has a switch of sorts, hero and civilian, but is still something to note. Perhaps what All Might said about him being happy is his actual personality, and the cold one is the villain persona. Additionally, Shigaraki was also able to get the better of All Might, not using brute strength or anything of the like, but by using words to knock him off balance. He somehow was able to hit chords within All Might that allowed him to gain the upper hand. He did the same to Aizawa-kun, but on a much smaller scale. He threw Aizawa-kun's weaknesses in his face and actively exploited them. And then there was All Might's initial note, saying how the attack seemed focused and yet not at the same time. There has to be a reason for this, but I can't think of it right now. From what I've heard and the information I gathered from my own investigation, Shigaraki was able to kill at the minimum 7 people directly but chose not to do so. If his attack was as focused as All Might claims, then we surely would have had to send out letters of condolences and possibly been forced to shut down, but we weren't. Nezu didn't speak up more after that, appearing to lose himself in his own thoughts. Yes, I agree, All Might nodded. If this attack was really as harebrained as to simply kill me or anyone else, then we'd already be dead. I believe there was more to this than we've been led to believe. But then that leaves us with the biggest question. What do we do now? Before anyone else could speak, Eraserhead answered him, there isn't much we can do. We know next to nothing about the instigators of the attack, we don't know if or when there will be another one, and we don't know the motive. Logically, what we should do is ensure the safety of the students as well as the mental health of 1A. Surely there's more that we can do than just that, Aizawa. Come on, Present Mike replied, waving his hand up and down. Do you have any better ideas, Mike? We're essentially chasing ghosts, and if Shigaraki is as smart as we believe him to be, he's not going to make another big move to keep the heat off him. If we try chasing him the traditional way, it'll end up in a wild goose chase, or worse, he'll disappear completely. Tsukauchi cleared his throat. Unfortunately, we at the station are of the same mind. As much as I hate to admit, this is a situation where we can't move proactively, but reactively. The best we can do at this point is to help the students in what ways we can, bolster security where it's needed, and hope we won't have to deal with them soon. I don't like this one bit, Nezu sighed, but I agree with Aizawa-kun and Tsukauchi-kun. There are far too many unknown variables in this to be able to respond appropriately. Everyone, I'd like to ask you all to do your best to support the students moving forward, as well as keep your ears to the ground. Detective, I believe that this covers this meeting's purpose? It does. If we have any follow-up questions, I'll be sure to reach out. Tsukauchi bowed and exited the room, leaving the heroes to discuss amongst themselves. No one was willing to speak up, still thinking over the dump of information given over the meeting. Everyone's faces were set in hard frowns, trying and failing to come up with countermeasures, blaming themselves for not doing more, praying that their integrity as heroes remains intact as the media no doubt is already writing their downfall. How could none of them, not even Nezu, see the purpose of the attack when it's unfolding all around them? Kadero didn't return to the bar after his meeting with All for One. Instead he chose to aimlessly roam Kamino, taking in the night sights. The streets were bustling with the nightlife, billboards and signs blazing in their bright neon colors, practically begging people to come in and enjoy what they have to offer. Groups of drunks were stumbling along the sidewalk, loud and obnoxious. He would have crossed the street and kept walking, but he was never one to move out of the way for someone else, save Master. So ahead he kept walking, purposefully walking into the middle of the group, shoving whoever was even slightly in his path out of his way. When he heard shouts of discontent from the group behind him, he just smirked to himself. He continued walking, no destination in mind, reflecting on his latest encounter with Master. He approves and accepts my plan, so what should I do now? Way too soon to do something else so big, but I don't want to lose any momentum. Maybe recruit some new members? I only went for fodder last time, but moving forward there should be at least some people who can think beyond petty crimes. By the time Kadero finally made up his mind, the moon was already high in the sky, but he still had more to do. He dipped into an alleyway, using the dumpsters and fire escapes to make his way onto the building's roof before pulling out his phone and dialing. It rang 4 times before the line was picked up. Jiren, Kadero spoke, less of a question and more of a statement. Depends on who's asking, a sleazy, lazy voice replied. Shigaraki. I want to put a line out. Oh. And what are we hoping to catch? Allies. I heard that your attack on UA was unsuccessful and whoever was with you was arrested. Finding people who are willing to join you after such a failure will be difficult. Those weren't allies, they were fodder. Their role was specifically to get captured. Why else would I bother with purse snatchers and convenience store robbers? I want actual villains this time, people who are willing to put in the work for the bigger payout. Still a bit of a tall order, but nothing that I can't do. Anything in particular? How many you hoping for? Normal vetting, I don't want any loose cannons or outright psychopaths. If they have some sort of honor or moral code, even better. Bring as many as you can find to the bar, but I'm capping the ones I take in at 8. And my fee? You'll be compensated accordingly. If I don't let them join, you get half. If they do, paid in full. A pause, slight pause, but when Jiren spoke up again, Kadero could tell he was smiling. I'll see what I can do. The line clicked and Kadero was left alone, staring over the city. He took a big breath, allowing some fire to escape his mouth, giving him temporary warmth. He took a running start to the edge of the building and leaped across to the next. Now to start phase 2. Shimura-kun. 3 knocks on his door sounded, Uraraka's voice behind it. Shimura-kun, are you all right? Everyone's been asking where you were after you didn't show for dinner. Shimura sat on the floor of his room, back against his bed facing the TV. The curtains were drawn closed and the lights were off, the room only illuminated by the TV. He sat hugging his knees, staring at the game over screen displayed on the game he was playing. His mind was still playing back the events of the USJ. The scream of the Nomu, the piercing gaze of Shigaraki, the words spoken to him, everything on a constant loop in his mind. His eyes peer at the screen from just over his arms. Beyond the words, it shows his character in a bloody mess, panning to whatever it was that killed him in the first place. That could have been me. That would have been me. Why the hell wasn't it me? More knocks pounded on his door, this time much louder and aggressive with an equally loud and aggressive voice behind it. Oi, nerd. Bring your sorry ass out here before I blast your door down. He heard even more voices call out after this, one of them sounding like the earnest voice that could only belong to Ida. Despite the war in his mind, he still smiled as he imagined the scene outside his door. Cat yelling at whoever dared to tell him otherwise, Ida chopping his hands as he tries to explain the importance of some rule, and Uraraka's head shaking back and forth like she was watching a tennis match as the 2 others go at it. Feeling his mood lighten a little, he slowly stood back up, shuffling quietly as he made his way to the door. He opened it slowly to allow his eyes to adjust to the light in the hallway and was greeted by exactly the sight he conjured up in his mind. He raised his hand up to scratch his neck but stopped himself before he made contact. Hey guys, he greeted, sorry for worrying everyone, it's just been really tough since. You know. All 3 friends stopped mid-action to look at him. Shimura-kun. Uraraka jumped at him, hugging him tightly before immediately backing off. Sorry about that. She sheepishly scratched at the back of her head. Bakugo studied him closely, his eyes flitting from him to his room behind him, eyeing the game over screen on the TV. Some gamer you are, still stuck on that easy-ass level? Ida was quick to admonish him. Bakugo-kun, it isn't polite to insult people on their skill in their hobbies. Was I talking to you for eyes? Not my fault the nerd is trash. Bakugo and Ida devolved into another arguing session, but Shimura didn't take what he said to heart. He's known him for years and has learned how to differentiate how he talks. This wasn't him telling him off, this was him silently asking if he was all right. No, he interrupted them, I was just trying out a glitch I found. It was supposed to make me invincible from that point on, but I guess I did something wrong. My character reverted just before I made it to the boss. Again, Shimura found himself under Cat's eyes. Whatever. You done then? Nope. I want to get it down. The boss is still really hard to beat, even after playing it over again. Shimura-kun, I must advise that you take a break for now. It isn't healthy to play video games for so long, and in the dark at that. Uraraka took this as her cue, yeah. Anyways, we came up here because Ashido-chan and Hagakure-chan are setting up a movie night down in the lounge since we're off school for a few days. You should come down and watch with us. Thanks. Shimura gave her a small smile. Yeah, that sounds great. You go ahead, I'll meet you down there. Ida and Uraraka waved as they left to round up whoever else was still in their rooms, but Bakugo stayed behind, not saying a word. Once they were out of view, Shimura let his shoulders droop and let out a long sigh. Listen to this. Bakugo grabbed Shimura's shirt and dragged him back into his room, slamming the door behind them. He threw Shimura onto the bed, walked over to his curtains, pulled them apart, and opened his windows to let in the fresh air. Grabbing the wooden chair sitting at his desk, he placed it facing the TV and plopped into it, arms resting on the back as he stared at Shimura. Neither boy spoke a word, staring at each other, reading each other's emotions, trying to glean some information from the look in their eyes. Shimura shifted uncomfortably on his bed as the silence dragged on, but he knew that Katsuki wasn't going to be the one to break it, so he bit the bullet. Kat, listen. I don't really know what you want from me. I'm a little down from what happened, so what? We're all safe now, that's what matters, right? Bakugo scoffed, as if you actually believe that. If you did, you wouldn't be holed up in your room playing that shitty game. So what actually happened that messed you up so badly? Like you don't already know, come on. No, I don't, Bakugo stated. I was out cold the entire time. All I remember is being transported to the mountain zone with shitty hair for brains, hearing a loud scream, finding the warp freak, then getting tackled. I woke up in a hospital bed wrapped in gauze. You know I don't like repeating myself, so tell me. What happened? Shimura stared defiantly at Katsuki before finally relenting. I almost died. Yeah, no shit. Me too. And shitty hair, and hobo, and Michelin man, and apparently frog and grape. We might as well throw in the entire class for that matter since the extras had to fight too. Shimura groaned. You're really going to make me say it, huh? Well, fine. I almost killed the Nomu almost killed me, and then I almost went and got myself killed again by wanting to go talk to the villains. Still doesn't explain anything. Do you believe that I can be a hero? The question threw Bakugo through a loop, coming completely out of the blue. He froze out of confusion, his eyes blinked slowly before his mind finally caught up. That was our plan from the beginning. You and me being heroes together. I'll be number one, you'll be number whatever because you'll never be as good as me. I'll blow them to bits, and you clean up after me. Shimura adjusted himself on his bed, sitting cross-legged at this point, desperation bleeding into his voice. But do you believe that I can be a hero? That I'm supposed to be a hero? Bakugo stayed silent, not understanding what's being said. Something happened when I was down there with the Nomu, before All Might came back. I wasn't thinking, I was just moving, and when my mind finally caught up to my body, my hand was on the Nomu. It was crumbling before me, screaming. I nearly took that thing down on my own, and then the dragon mask villain, Shigaraki. He spoke to me. He broke down my quirk in an instant, mentioned how my quirk could be used to kill people so easily, asked if I wanted to be a hero. Of course I'd want to be a hero, right? That's why I'm here. But a part of me wanted to keep going. After All Might defeated the Nomu and the villains were just waiting, I started to walk towards them. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I just really wanted to touch them. Reduce them to dust. That's not what a hero does, right? Shimura was scratching at his neck frantically, parts of it starting to bleed from the irritation. Bakugo was in front of him in a second, grabbing onto his hands to stop him. Stop that, thanks. You know you're not supposed to do that. He made his way to Shimura's bathroom, searching through the drawers until he found his ointment. He tossed it to Shimura, who caught it and silently started applying it to his neck. You never answered me, Cat. Because you already know the answer to that, Bakugo retorted, sitting back down on the chair. I might be number one, but that doesn't mean you're gonna be nothing. You're gonna be a hero, even if I have to beat that into you until you realize that. Then why do I feel like I'm not? Shit, tanks, I'm not a therapist, I don't know. Go talk to Hobo or something, I'm sure he'll have a better answer. At the mention of their teacher, Shimura's eyes widened in remembrance. Fuck. Aizawa-sensei wanted to talk with me about the USJ. I'm so screwed. Bakugo smirked. Have fun with that, nerd. Aizawa was poring over the notes he'd been given by Tsukauchi, reading over every statement from each of his students, paying more attention to the ones that either came into contact with or were able to view Shigaraki from where they were at. All the stories lined up, each going over the same events in the same fashion, but he couldn't help but feel that something was missing. He moved from his coffee table where the papers were spread out to the computer on the counter behind him, rewatching the footage they were able to recover from the USJ. Luckily, whatever quirk they used to knock out the security system didn't affect the cameras, but watching over the footage only filled him with more anguish. Each time he watched the clips over, he was reminded of his faults as a teacher, as a hero. Not only was he unable to protect his students from danger, but he was also taken out easily. He was sidelined not even 10 minutes into the attack, completely unaware of what was happening behind and around him. When he came to, all he could do was hope that his students could fend for themselves long enough until more help arrived. He leafed through the clips to when Shigaraki was reported to being in the mountain zone. Unfortunately, none of the cameras in the zone had the best angle, but it was clear that Shigaraki was watching the fight between the Nomu and All Might intently, only taking his eyes off when he was addressed by Bakugo. He continued to watch, noting down what Bakugo stated about Kurogiri's quirk, extremely helpful for any future instances. As the clip got to the point when Bakugo attacked Shigaraki, he paid closer attention. Through the pixelation, it was hard to make out, but he could see Shigaraki's body move as if he was taking a deep breath. At the same time, he saw that the explosion Bakugo was releasing dissipate, and smoke started to billow out of Shigaraki's mask. He clicked through the different cameras again, trying to find one that had a better angle. He replayed the same moment, watching as Shigaraki took a breath, and Bagwo's explosion disappearing. He let the clip play through to completion, noting that the strength of the attack Shigaraki released looked eerily similar to the explosion that came from Bakugo's full gauntlet. Aizawa rubbed his eyes, fatigued from working for so long but pushed through. Looking through the footage for when Shigaraki used his quirk again, to right before his co-workers made it to the entrance. This time, there was no explosion, but he noticed that Shigaraki had sizable balls of fire from his hands. Shigaraki looked to take a deep breath again, but this time the fires at his hands disappeared, and what came out from his mask looked exactly like them. Aizawa's eyes widened in realization, quickly going back to the Mountain Zone's cameras and watching through again. He watched the clip at the plaza over again, comparing to what he did before. So, Shigaraki can pull fire from an external source and release it through his mouth. He must have a support item that could make a fire he could use in case there isn't already one going. He walked to his couch, letting himself fall over the edge and landing on it laying down, an arm covering his eyes. An unregistered warp quirk and a sort of flamethrower quirk, both extremely powerful from the looks of it. That's one checkmark on the what do we know list, but that's still nowhere near enough information. Unwilling to work any longer, he let himself drift off to sleep. His dreams were haunted by Shigaraki's dragon mask and toxic green eyes. A bell jingled as the bar door closed shut. Kurogiri didn't look towards the door, preferring to finish polishing a glass with a white towel. Kadero was sitting at the bar, silently writing down notes in his notebook. The only sounds in the bar are the light scratching of his pen on paper and the low hum of the air conditioner. "What do you want?" he called out, not stopping his writing. The man at the door smirked. He was wearing a purple suit jacket with matching slacks, a white dress shirt underneath with the top buttons undone, and a thick gold chain could be seen resting on his neck just peeking out from under his shirt. He combed the longer fringe of his gray hair and popped a cigarette in his mouth. "Is that any way to greet your name, twin?" he responded, opening his arms wide as if asking for a hug. Without looking, Kadero shot his right hand out, 2 fingers pointing, a thin line of smoke trailing from the tips. Kadero Okuta, better known as Jiren to the underground, has a reputation of being sleazy, walking with a swagger in his step, and being worth every yen paid. He was an information broker of the highest regard, with customers and clients on both sides of the law, some as low as muggers, others as high as the Hero Public Safety Commission itself. As one could expect, he's met with extremely dangerous people, So when he finds a scorch mark smoking next to his head, level with his mouth, he didn't flinch in the slightest. He let out a disappointed sigh. The joke he attempted to open with fell on deaf ears. He took a few more steps deeper into the bar, his left hand stuck in his pocket while he motioned to Kurogiri for a glass. He silently complied, pouring him a glass, placing it on a napkin and an ashtray at the seat next to Kadero. "Since you're here alone, I assume you're out of luck," Kadero guessed. Jiren took a puff of his cigarette, belatedly realizing that it was already lit. "As much as it pains me to say that I am." He took a swig of the glass. "It's been a week already, and while there are people out there, no one is willing to side with you. Even knowing your backer." He raised his glass to the TV. Kadero closed his notebook, sitting up straighter on the stool. "Anyone you feel worth putting on a wait list?" "There are a few," Jiren shrugged, taking a sip of his glass, "but they're more hung up on another character, the hero killer Stain." He sounds familiar. He's based in Tokyo, right?" "Not exactly. Sources and reports say he started in Tokyo, but he's been reported to be bouncing around the country. 1 month he's in Tokyo, the next he's up in Sapporo, then so on and so forth." "Well, where is he now?" "Somewhere in Kanagawa." "If you want specifics, that'll cost you." Kadero snorted. "No, that's more than enough." "So Stain is the reason why things are moving slowly? If this Stain is a hindrance, then we should take care of him immediately," Kurogiri interjected. "There's no need for that," Kadero waved him off. "Maybe we can start a dialogue with him, see if he's willing to join. If we can get him on our side, then all the holdouts will follow." "Can you arrange a meeting with him?" Jiren took a long drag before replying. "The best I can do is put another line out. He's notorious for flying under the radar despite the high-profile kills, and even more selective when it comes to making contact. If he wants to talk, he'll find you." The conversation lapsed into silence, Kadero thinking over his options while Jiren just sat enjoying his drink. "Guess I'll have to shake some trees and see what falls," Kadero stated, breaking the silence, a small puff of smoke escaping his mouth. He stood up and walked to the door that led further into the building, leaving the 2 other occupants staring at each other, Jiren raising an eyebrow in a question. The 2 stayed quiet until Kadero returned, dropping an envelope of money next to Jiren's glass. "That's for your work so far. Give me the shortlist, and I'll follow up with them on my own time." Kadero ripped a page out of his notebook and slid it over to Jiren, who took it and the offered pen. "So I'm assuming this is the end of the current deal?" "It's a pause. Depending on how it goes with Stain, I'll be calling you again." Jiren downed the rest of his drink and put his cigarette out on the ashtray. He stood up, grabbing the envelope and putting it in his jacket pocket. "Then for now, I'll see you around." Kadero and Kurogiri watched him as he ambled to the door, not waving goodbye or any other form of acknowledgement. As the door clicked and the bell jingled again, Kurogiri passed a glass to Kadero. "What will you do now, Kadero? With Stain in the picture, you won't be getting the new members you'd like," Kurogiri pointed out. Kadero lightly groaned. "It's to be expected. While we went dark following the attack, Stain has apparently been making his rounds and making a name for himself. We need to get a move on before any respect we might have had is gone. Are we not going to try and meet with this Stain?" "Oh, not yet." Kadero shook his head. "As we are now, there is only one thing to our name, and even though we know that our attack was a success, everyone else sees it as a failure and an embarrassment. No, first we need to show everyone that we aren't a joke." "What will we do?" "Killing heroes will make people think we're copycats. Robberies and kidnappings aren't front-page stories anymore. Unless..." Kadero swirled his glass as he was lost in thought. "Master, is the facility still up and running?" Tsukauchi stood in front of the rolling whiteboard that showed any and everything he had regarding the attack on the USJ. At the top of the board were the sketches they have for Shigaraki and Kurogiri, the clear leader or leaders of the attack. Off to the side, just slightly below the 2 was the mugshot they had for the Nomu. Having interviewed all the villains that were arrested, it was clear to him that they were nothing but pawns, and thus weren't worth placing them on the board. Sticky notes and lists were sprawled all over, asking any and all questions. Beneath the sketches, a checklist was written for each: name, quirk, alias, allegiance, anything to help them complete the picture. One clear leader, a getaway, and a strong asset. A mob of villains, no casualties, no demands, nothing. Where is the connection? His office door opened, revealing Aizawa coming through with 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He handed one to Tsukauchi, who took it gratefully, pulling the cap off to smell the drink. He sighed contentedly as he took his first sip. Thanks for that, Aizawa. Tsukauchi sat up against his desk. I hope you've got something new to add. Aizawa grunted an affirmative. I believe I've figured out Shigaraki's quirk, or at least understood enough of it to maybe help narrow down searching through the registry. Tsukauchi looked at him with wide eyes and a marker in his hand. Well, what is it? Some form of pyrokinesis. Aizawa himself took a drink of his coffee and sat in the spare seat. We already know that much. He's a fire breather that can't produce his own flames. Aizawa walked over to Tsukauchi's computer and plugged in a drive. He scrolled through the files until he found what he was looking for. This is the first instance of where we see Shigaraki use his quirk, in the mountain zone when he encountered Bakugo and Kirishima. He pressed play, stepping back so that Tsukauchi could have a full view. He let it play to completion before changing it. And this is when we see him use it again right before he escapes. He let Tsukauchi watch the clips on his own, turning his attention to his coffee. When he noticed Tsukauchi stand up straight again, he looked at him expectantly. I'm not sure I'm following how you made that jump. Tsukauchi shook his head. The clips are in good quality, but I can't make out what you're saying. When he faced off Bakugo, we can see that Bakugo did release an explosion right before it suddenly disappeared. If you focus on Shigaraki, you can almost see him taking an extremely deep breath at the same time. When he releases it, the flames that come out are in the same magnitude, if not greater, than what the explosion was. Right before he escapes, we can see that he has 2 fireballs on his hands. Again, we can see him take a deep breath and the flames disappear. When he lets it out again, the fire looks to be twice as strong. I hate the word, but my theory is that whenever he inhales, he draws in whatever fire is in his vicinity and breathes it out just as or twice as strong as the source. But you said that he can't create his own fire, Tsukauchi pointed out. The reports from Azui, Shimura, and Mineta all say that when he moved to attack them directly, they saw the making of flames coming from his hands. This is why I hate the words theory, because it's nothing but guesswork, Aizawa groaned, but I still maintain that Shigaraki can't create his own fire. It's easy enough to create a support item that could create fire. For all we know, he could probably get away with using a simple lighter. And considering the fact that Bakugo himself stated that it felt like his explosion got taken from him, I believe that's his actual quirk. Tsukauchi rubbed at his forehead. I don't know, Aizawa, it's still not too much to go off. Even if you were able to figure out his quirk, there's no guarantee it's even in the registry. Aizawa stared blankly at Tsukauchi before slightly nodding. I'm aware of that, but regardless of whether this is enough to find them, it's still best to get an understanding of what we're dealing with. Fine. Tsukauchi relented. I'll look again, but you owe me more than 1 cup of coffee next time I see you. Aizawa nodded and grunted, leaving Tsukauchi behind to his musings. Kadero sat in his room on his computer, poring over the files the facility had in the last 15 years. The facility was one of All for One's projects that he had been running around the time he came upon Kadero. A chain of court counseling offices spread throughout Japan. All were situated in poorer regions, and almost exclusively took in anybody that society deemed to have a villainous quirk or anything non-flashy or non-combative. It was the perfect setup for All for One to cherry-pick the best quirks that came through. Despite its ties, the facility and its proponents were completely legal and had all the proper certificates and qualifications to run as a court counseling office. The counselors there were some of the best, and those that came in almost always ended up in a hero school, some of them even making it to UA or Shiketsu. Those that were lucky enough to eventually make it in the top 100 became the pride and joy of the facility. It wasn't an indoctrination center or anything along those lines. It did exactly what was expected. The only reason All for One bothered with it past its initial phase was because he saw the potential it had. By keeping documents and files about every quirk and user that entered its doors, he was able to keep track of any quirk he liked. This way, when he took the quirk, he wouldn't need to train it to increase its strength. That would already be done. Kadero opened one last folder, quickly reading over its documents. His eyes glinting in the low light, he read aloud the file name. Kanagawa Branch, Active Heroes, Year 2XXX. Kadero let out a light chuckle. Let's see who the better hunter is, Stain. You may not have been my original target, but you will do just fine, an almost crazed voice declared, the man's hand raised in the air, a katana pointing down, hovering inches above the prone hero's heart. May your sacrifice usher in the coming of a new era of heroes. Wait, please, I can dash. The hero's eyes widened in pain and shock before rolling into the back of his head. The villain removed his katana, swinging it to the side, flinging off the blood that clung to the blade. He stood over the body, taking in the pathetically distasteful costume. The fallen hero was wearing a deep blue bodysuit, complete with a tight-fitting hood. Plastered on his chest was a picture of the planet Saturn minus its rings. Pebbles and rocks lay flat on his chest, having fallen from their orbit when the hero died. The villain scoffed. To think you were able to make it this far shows how rotten the system is. If only I could find my actual target, removing the small fries changes nothing. He walked further into the alleyway, blending into the shadows before jumping onto the roof. The hero woke with a start, her head still foggy. She looked around the room, completely barren save for the chair in front of her and the singular light bulb hanging between the two. The walls looked to be made of smooth concrete, with only a door on the wall facing her. She tried to move but found herself bound to the chair she sat on. Craning her neck as far back as it could go, she found that her arms were bound behind her, attached directly to the chair's back. Struggling a bit, she found no wiggle room and what felt like metal covering the entirety of her forearms. Looking down at her legs, she saw they were attached to the chair legs, her ankles wrapped in thick metal clamps. She huffed, realizing her arms were probably bound the same way. Despite her bonds, she still tried to struggle free. After what felt like 10 minutes, she stopped, realizing she was completely stuck. She puffed at a lock of hair that got loose in her struggles. Luckily, she could still move her hands, which means she could still use her quirk. Flicking her right wrist, a dark mass of shadows sprang to life. As quickly as it came to life, it was immediately dispelled. She didn't want to risk her captor knowing she could still use her quirk. Before long, the door opened, revealing her kidnapper. When they finally came into the light, her eyes narrowed at the sight of the mask he was wearing, a green dragon maw. Kadero Shigaraki, she spat out, her struggling began anew as she tried to attack him. To her credit, he blinked in surprise. Well, that saves time on the introductions. He crouched down, placing a glass on the floor next to his chair before walking towards her with another drink in hand, a straw swishing with the movement. He raised it to her mouth. Drink? I'm sure you're thirsty. She turned her head to the side, like I'd ever drink anything you give me. Shigaraki rolled his eyes, keeping the glass up. It's not poisoned. Why would I go through the trouble of keeping you contained if I was just going to kill you right off the bat? You apparently know who I am. If I wanted you dead, you already would be. She eyed him a few seconds longer before relenting. She took the straw in but stared Shigaraki down the entire time. Shigaraki just watched impassively before suddenly pulling the drink away, deciding that was enough. He sat down in the chair before her and crossed his arms, just watching her. She met his gaze head-on with a glare of her own. When seconds turned to minutes, she started to shift uncomfortably. Look, whatever it is dash. Esmeralda Kaya, also known as the Dream Hunter hero, Rhea. Quirk, Nightmare, he stated, the now-named hero's eyes narrowing again as he went on. Twilight Hero, ranked 247 overall. Forced to leave your home country, Turkey, after accidentally placing everybody in your apartment complex in a nightmare upon your quirk's awakening. At the last sentence, Rhea lost started to writhe in her bonds again. How do you know that? What do you want? Moved to Hiratsuka with your mother at 5 years old. Kadero ignored her. He stood up and started to circle her. Still living with her in a nice, lush apartment overlooking the sea, using your earnings as a hero to give your mother a life of comfort. How noble, to stay true to the tradition of providing for your parent as they grow older as they provided for you growing up. Rhea let out a scream, her normal harsh and abrasive personality being dropped entirely as panic started to seep in. Joined up with an agency with light-quirked heroes hoping to find a place where you could fit in, but even among the heroes there you were still an outcast. Enough! Rhea screamed, the massive shadows appearing once again. Its features forming horns, glowing red eyes peeked out from the front as a mouth opened, revealing jagged teeth and a red abyss within. With the short distance between her and Kadero, the shadow leapt at him. Immediately Kagero's vision darkened and his senses dulled. He felt himself stumble backwards into the chair, but all he could hear were echoes of voices long forgotten playing in the back of his mind. I told you to stay out of my office. Your father loves you understand so he's just stressed from work. Isashi, oh, stop. You want to be a hero? I thought you loved your family. After what felt like an hour, but only lasted for barely 15 seconds, his senses came back to him in full force. He was once again back in the nondescript room, with a captured hero in front of him. He shuddered violently before taking a few seconds longer to regain his breath. He shakily raised his hand to his mask, retracting it so that he could take full breaths unhindered. As he finally managed to bring his heart rate under control, his focus shifted to Rhea. Rhea herself didn't look too good either. She was sunken into her chair as much as she could, out of breath as well. Her black to white hair was stuck to her face by the sweat that had accumulated. Her blue and amber yellow eyes were slightly glazed over. Incredible! He spit out a glob of blood, offhandedly noticing he bit his cheek sometime during Rhea's assault. Your, what do you call them, prowlers? Those don't induce the nightmares, do they? No, your victims say that when they get hit they just get nearsighted. That must have been everything you had. He let out an incredulous laugh, and I'm still standing. In any other situation that would have ensured your victory. He sighed, having sobered up a little. That was really stupid of you, Shigaraki hissed, his tone dipping. Rhea recovered from her attack, but instantly paled as she felt ice creep up her veins. Despite being spent, she picked up her efforts of escape. She felt one of the braces break as she pulled an arm free. She gasped in delight before freezing, Shigaraki having caught her arm with one hand and cupping her face in the other. He brought his face in close. You should have tried that after getting your arm free. A villain stood on top of a building, listening to the sounds of the city, looking for any more fakes he could cull tonight before disappearing. His hunt in this city, while successful, felt far less rewarding. Someone was getting in his way, reaching his targets before he could get to them. Even after his targets showed themselves, they were no longer worth culling, that much he could tell. The first time he found his target after they had gone missing, they all but begged for him to kill them. Instead of fear or regret in their eyes, he would see something that almost looked like relief. Completely thrown off, he momentarily forgot that he was going to kill them, but instead asked them what happened. Each time he found his target, the reply was the same. I don't want to be a hero anymore, I'm retiring, they all said. Somehow, someone knew exactly who he was going after and beat him to them. Someone was doing his job of ridding the world of fakes. He growled in frustration, about to take a leap onto the next building when he felt a shift in the air. He turned around, katana already drawn and at the ready when he saw a figure made of mist. I apologize for the suddenness, Stain, but I must ask you come with me, the figure greeted. Stain narrowed his eyes, raising his katana towards them. Who are you and how did you find me? I am called Kurogiri, as he bowed. As for your second question, that is better reserved for our leader. We don't want to take too much of your time, and after we're done talking, I'd be happy to transport you to any city you wish so that you may continue your hunt. Stain eyed Kurogiri a little longer before sheathing his blade. One conversation. 10 minutes. Of course, Kurogiri swept his arm, brining another portal to life. After you? Stain entered the purple portal and emerged in the bar. The only other person inside was a man with green hair, wearing an oversized black long-sleeve shirt and ripped gray jeans. Stain didn't need any more introductions, already aware of who he was. Shigaraki was standing behind the bar, wiping his hands clean with a towel as he saw who came through. Kurogiri materialized in his place behind the bar beside him as Shigaraki pulled out 2 glasses, gesturing to one of the seats. He turned around to search the bar for a bottle before grabbing it. Would you like a drink? Shigaraki asked, already pouring himself one. I know that this is a rather last-minute meeting, so it's the least I could offer. Stain didn't move from where he exited the portal, nor did he give any sort of indication he was going to sit otherwise, so Shigaraki just shrugged. He moved around to the other side of the bar and stood in front of Stain. Tell me something, are you aware of the influence you hold? It's amazing, despite being a villain, you have people praising your actions on both sides. So tell me, how can a guy like you, who leaves no witnesses, have a bigger following than me? Why is it that you're being praised while I'm being ridiculed? Stain's hunched form took a step forward, slightly closing the distance between the two. What do you want? You want me to join you on your pointless crusade? Follow someone who doesn't know what they want. Pointless? I don't know what I want. Shigaraki paused and swirled his glass before sitting on his stool. You make me sound as if I'm some sort of child that's throwing a tantrum. Stop trying to take the high ground. From what I've learned about you, we do the exact same thing. Oh, and what is it you think that I do? You kill heroes you deem unworthy, using criteria that no one but you knows. Shigaraki threw his head back and downed his drink in one go and set the glass down. He swiveled so he was facing Stain directly. You think yourself the judge, jury, and executioner when really you're just like any other serial killer. You kill heroes because you like doing it? That is where you're wrong. I kill because somebody has to. Every hero I killed has been a fake. They use their status as a hero to gain fame and fortune, while simultaneously taking the title's hero and turning it into a job. The standard for a hero has dropped, and only a select few actively stay true to the essence and history of what a hero should be. Nobody is willing to take action to make the changes that needs to be done. Stain ranted on, an aura of conviction radiating off of him. But I am. Through my hunts, I have removed the weak links, the bad eggs, the dead branches. I alone am increasing the quality of the heroes. Shigaraki stared at Stain, impressed by his statement before chuckling. You're a villain and you've taken lives, but the reason why you're doing it is for the greater good, right? I bet you were even a hero hopeful once. It would answer so many questions regarding your actions. Stain growled and lunged, a knife appearing in his hand. He slashed at Kurogiri, nicking his arm before he could form a portal. He then threw a knife at Shigaraki, implanting itself in his shoulder as he was thrown off the chair. Stain followed up, immediately setting himself on top of Shigaraki, grasping the hilt of the embedded blade and twisting, causing him to let out a cry. Guess I hit a nerve with that one, huh? Shigaraki groaned. Kurogiri? How are you doing over there? Kurogiri replied through a strained voice. I can't move. It must be his quirk. I came here because the mist man said you wanted to talk, that you had a proposition for me, Stain snarled, but since arriving, all that's happened is you insult me. So, I'm going to give you one last chance. What do you want? Stain applied more pressure on the blade in Shigaraki's shoulder. He groaned a little but still let out a chuckle. You and I really are alike. You feel dissatisfied with the current state of heroes, so you take out the ones that aren't up to snuff. I feel dissatisfied with the current state of heroes, so I break them. Our methods differ but our goal is the same. We want society to stop placing anybody with a good quirk on pedestals. You want true heroes, but I only want the best. Shigaraki took a deep breath, fire coming to life in the back of his throat. Stain's eyes widened as he jumped off, just missing the stream of fire as it was released. Stain raised his katana in preparation as Shigaraki stood up. I don't want you to join me. Shigaraki touched the knife in his shoulder but winced. Just from our little interaction I could tell that you and I won't get along. So what I'm proposing instead is a truce of sorts. Stain dropped his blade a few centimeters. Shigaraki took that as a sign he's listening. I'll stop taking your targets if you send people my way. Stain's posture faltered for a second before recovering. What do you mean to send people your way? I work alone. I have no followers. Do you not remember the first thing I asked you when you came in? Whether they're aware of your true intentions or not, people have been following your movements since you surfaced. You've gained a following in the underground, and because of that, my own plans have been halted. I don't know if this is asking too much, he started as he walked away through the door. At the complete lack of caution or respect to what was happening, Stain dropped his katana entirely, dumbfounded by Shigaraki's actions. Kurogiri let out an audible sigh as the silence stretched long. I apologize, Stain. Kadero Shigaraki has a tendency to go on a bit of a tangent mid-conversation. He will be back shortly. If you would be so kind as to let me free, I can prepare you a drink as we wait. Stain grunted and sheathed his sword, finally taking up residence on a stool. Just get me a sake. Now free of Stain's influence, Kurogiri bowed and pulled out a bottle, placing it in front of him. It seems that all I do is apologize for Kadero Shigaraki's actions, but he truly does mean what he's saying. We sought you out because we heard that everyone that would be willing to join us is too busy being caught up in your actions. The door opened again, and Shigaraki walked out, his shoulder patched up and now wearing a tank top. As he walked, he idly flipped Stain's knife in the air. Not even taking a moment to take in the scene, he continued his conversation as if nothing happened. I don't know if it's asking too much, but could you at least meet with some of your followers? Explain to them that you work alone, but you know of a group who you're allied with. I never agreed to an alliance with you. A non-aggression pact, whatever. If you do this, everyone will win. You get to go on your hunts unhindered by me or anyone else crazy enough to try to seek you out. I get new allies for my league, and the people that join would be able to do what they want, just under a new banner. How does that sound? Your terms are agreeable, but there's still one problem, Stain responded. Your group, the League of Villains, you've done one thing and failed. If I start promoting you, it'll make me look bad. I thought you weren't concerned with your reputation so long as you achieve your goals, Shigaraki shot back, crossing his arms. He shook his head before adding on, everyone misunderstood the purpose of the attack on UA, not like I didn't expect that since I didn't announce our goals, but it's still annoying to have to explain it all the time. I attacked UA to show them, to show the rest of the country, that even the best of the best is vulnerable. Like I said, you kill heroes because they don't live up to your standards. I break them because they're too weak to stand up to mine. Stain sat quietly, contemplating his next moves. He leaned over and grabbed Shigaraki's empty glass, pouring some sake in it and handed it over. I accept. He reached out with his own cup, toasting with Shigaraki to a successful deal. Thank you all for coming, Nezu greeted his teachers. With the sports festival days away, I wanted to touch base with everyone and see if there are any last-minute requests. Aizawa immediately raised his hand. No, Aizawa-kun, we can't cancel the sports festival. Aizawa grumbled as he lowered his hand, sinking into his capture weapon. Even if there wasn't a threat to our students' safety, canceling it this late into the process would be disastrous for not just UA, but for everybody involved. Majima-kun, how are things progressing with updating security? A short, bare-chested man sat up straighter in his chair. His orange hair covering the entire upper half of his face, an excavator claw-shaped helmet sat on the table in front of him. They're about as good as they can get given the wide-scale changes you wanted. He tapped on the conference table, a holograph popped up, displaying a camera feed. From the looks of it, the view was of the conference room itself. All of the cameras have been upgraded to have facial recognition with a direct link to multiple precinct servers for any and all processed criminals. The analysis is done in real time and can work with a minimum of 30% facial clearance, with a 97% accuracy rating. Wonderful! Nezu chirped, and the sensor array? Majima scratched his head, dismissing the holograph. That one is still in the works, unfortunately. The villains that attacked the USJ had the forethought of ensuring we were completely blocked out for the duration of the attack, and because warp/teleporting quirks are rare, I don't know exactly how to track it, let alone develop a way to scramble it. The footage we had from the attack helps, but there isn't much data I can pull from that. He paused, taking in the confused looks of his coworkers and Nezu's expectant gaze. Oh come on now, that wasn't even actual technical language. Majima groaned, rubbing his temples. Under his breath he mumbled something, but no one was able to catch what he said. No, the sensor array and scrambler aren't working yet. I know far too little about the warp quirk to develop any dependable means to work against it. Which means, he stressed this word a bit more, hoping that everyone else was still following, there is still a chance that we could be attacked while the festival is going on. He sat back in his chair, crossing his arms, his fingers drumming annoyedly. A heavy silence fell on the room as they processed the fact that there was still a major threat to security. It's unfortunate, but this shouldn't be a problem, the spiky white-haired hero spoke up, trying to boost the morale. We've already increased our in-person security fivefold. Principal Nezu said he was able to contract heroes to patrol around the grounds, and we'll have who knows how many plain-clothed cops walking around as well. Adding the upgraded cameras to the mix, I'd say we're pretty well covered. If someone tries to start something, they'll be shut down immediately. Vlad, while I appreciate your optimism, I don't think you truly understand the scope of the villains we're worried about, Aizawa spoke up. These villains, Shigaraki and Kurogiri, they aren't your run-of-the-mill bank robbers. Shigaraki is smart, and Kurogiri is an asset that we have no way of confronting. And I think you're overestimating them, Vlad replied gruffly. I'm not going to act like I know what I'm talking about when it comes to the villains, because that would be an insult to everyone that was affected, but from what I've heard regarding them, we don't need to worry about an attack during the sports festival. The other teachers stared at Vlad, silently asking him to carry on. If they're half as smart as you make them out to be, then a widespread attack is the last thing on their mind. All Might and Principal Nezu both said that there could be some ulterior motive to the attack, and I think we're witnessing it right now. Aizawa, your whole gimmick is making rational and logical decisions, but you pushing so hard to cancel the festival is the exact opposite. Take a step back and think. Vlad could tell he had everyone's attention when he saw everyone's heads turn between Vlad and Aizawa. Anyone who has ever met Aizawa knows that he prides himself on non-biased and logic-based decisions, so being called out like this is unheard of. You were attacked, but you came out relatively unscathed. All Might was attacked and came out no worse than he normally is. Your students were attacked and the worst injury was a broken hand. Shigaraki could have killed you and everyone there but didn't. Do you ever wonder why? Aizawa hissed, every day since. But what about 13 then? 13 was attacked and survived, had the worst injuries out of everyone, but will make a full recovery. Vlad-kun, Nezu interjected, his paws steepled on the table. As much as I love hearing your opinion, might I remind you that we are still on a bit of a schedule. I have an idea of your point, but I would like for it to be made in a timely manner. Vlad sighed, shaking his head. I believe Shigaraki's ulterior motive was to create fear and panic, while making us doubt ourselves. He purposefully attacked the USJ and wanted to get in our heads. He wants us to fear him, and he did that by showing us exactly how easy it was for him to do it. Aizawa was stunned into silence. Not only did Vlad call him out on irrationality, but it seems that he also was able to solve the problem that evaded himself, and even Nezu. The staff liked to joke around a lot, and generally gravitated towards having Vlad on the receiving end because of his reactions, but they all forgot one thing. Vlad King was still a pro with a respectable record. He reacts accordingly based on the joke because he takes everything in at face value. With him being so far removed from the problem, he had the clearest look at the situation. What makes you so sure that he won't attack the festival? A voice asked. Vlad turned his head to face the hero it belonged to. The hero, in simple terms, looked like a block of cement, with small eyes set near the top of his head and mouth set in a perpetual frown. If his goal was to create fear, then wouldn't the festival be the perfect opportunity? Thousands, if not millions of people watch it from home, and at least tens of thousands will be present in person. Because of what All Might said, Vlad pointed at the man, who coughed up blood into a handkerchief. What did I say? All Might spluttered. You said that he didn't seem crazed. Vlad pointed directly at him. The type of people that would launch an attack of that magnitude on that many people has to be unstable to a certain degree. They want chaos for the sake of chaos. But because Shigaraki acted as if he had a certain goal, he doesn't fit that category, Aizawa finished. He sat slouched in his chair, seemingly deflating as his head dipped ever further within his capture weapon. The sports festival should go off without a hitch, yes, Vlad concluded. After an undeterminable amount of time, Nezu spoke up again. Does anybody have anything more to add? He was met with a resounding silence, everyone still caught up in what they just witnessed. Then I believe this meeting is adjourned. Please resume your preparations. The sports festival will begin in 2 days' time. Kadero, the speakers on the TV crackled to life. The sports festival is soon. What do you plan to do about it? Kadero stopped typing on his laptop to peek at the TV. As always, no video was shown, but there was no mistake that All for One was on the other end. He glanced at Kurogiri, who stood at his place behind the bar, his eyes asking if he called. With no response from him, Kadero turned to face the TV fully. The only plan I have for that is simply to watch it from here. I would try to go in person, but All Might and some of the students saw my face, he responded. I'm also certain that UA upped their security since the attack, so getting in and out of there unnoticed won't be as easy as before. Surely that isn't enough of a deterrent for you? It isn't, but I would have nothing to gain from seeing it in person. The entire event is televised, so I would arguably get a better idea of the students' skills than if I were confined to the stadium. The longer my exposure out there, the greater the risk I'd get found out. Your penchant for caution is admirable, but there are times when you must take a bold step forward. If you continue to hide out, you not only eventually lose any courage you have to take that step, but you also lose any hope of growing. You have stated multiple times that you don't want to lose the momentum you gained, yet all you've done since is take heroes out of the picture behind the scenes. The only people aware of what you've done are in this room, the heroes themselves, and the hero killer. I heard your conversation with him. I heard the plans that you were making after Jiren left. I heard what you did with the heroes. I may have given you my blessing for the long-term goal, but you haven't been making any real progress towards reaching it. Kadero could hear the subtle shift in All for One's voice the longer he talked. He heard it change from inquisitive, to lecturing, to almost impatience. Do I have to step in for you? Kadero lightly bristled at the tone and implication. Even Kurogiri's form faltered for a second. Kadero slowly turned his head to Kurogiri. Silently he mouthed water at him. A glass was immediately pushed forth. Kadero took a long sip before answering, trying to come up with an appropriate response. No, master. That will be unnecessary, he eventually choked out. Is it not? You've shown me great potential with your work, yet ever since we had our talk, you have yet to truly take initiative. Your lack of action makes me wonder if you truly have your heart set on the motion. Master, if I may dash, Kurogiri tried to placate. No, All for One cut him off. I want to hear this from him. Kadero felt like he was back in the room in front of All for One. He could feel the oppressing force he exudes, and couldn't help but stumble his way through as his mind raced to find a way out of the situation as close to amicably as he could. I want to buy as much time as I can before I start making my moves. I used the USJ as a test. He paused, trying to find the words. Society's been lulled into a state of relative peace because of All Might, and I learned that because of that, UA has become just as lax as everyone else. The rat calling himself principal isn't as omniscient or omnipotent he likes to believe, and because they're a school first, they have no real authority outside of school matters. The sports festival will be filled to the brim with heroes and civilians alike, and will probably be decked out with the best security UA could upgrade to in the time between. If I were to attack it, I'd be announcing myself to the whole world, which I'm not ready to do yet. Yet you're willing to show yourself to UA, one of the best hero schools in the country, with no problem. Kadero perked up a little. He heard the tone change, but he didn't dare to get his hopes up too high. I can deal with the heroes they have on staff, that much I'm sure of. He shifted a little in his seat. I can deal with random heroes showing up in the city, but having everyone on the lookout for me isn't something I want to deal with right now. That's why I want to recruit people first, bolster my numbers and cover my blind spots. Kadero, if you are looking to recruit, would it not be better if we ask around ourselves? Kurogiri spoke up. We have the list we received from Jiren, so should we not follow up? He shook his head. No, if we start going after them ourselves, we'll make ourselves look needy and desperate. And master, he leveled a look toward the TV, I'm sorry to say, but if you get more involved than you already are, we might end up with way more heat on both sides than I'd be comfortable with. The bar stilled, anxiously waiting for a response. Kadero tentatively finished his water and passed the glass to Kurogiri, who carefully and quietly started to clean it off. That was well thought out, Kadero. All for One's voice cut through the silence. Very well. I'll stay my hand for now, but I do expect results. Kadero bowed his head towards the TV. Thank you, master. I promise I won't disappoint. See to it you don't. The TV clicked off. leaving Kadero and Kurogiri to stare at each other, both releasing a relieved sigh. Kadero, do you truly plan on not attending the sports festival? Kurogiri asked. It would be no bother to me to warp you in undetected. I really wasn't planning on it, but after that I feel like I have no choice, Kadero lamented. At the very least I'll get an idea of what kind of upgrades UA made, and maybe see who they can get to work as security. Kadero puffed a little smoke in the air. Leaning back into the chair, he scratched the back of his head. Getting into UA wouldn't be a problem. Getting recognized would be a pain. Getting out would be even more so. Maybe I'll see if our little helper can't do anything about that. His phone rang, taking him from his thoughts. Not looking at who was calling, he picked it up. What? On the other side of the call, an annoyed grunt came out. Nice to hear from you too. Listen, I don't know what you did or said to the hero killer, but now I'm getting contacts and requests left and right. Kadero sat up, his attention fully on the conversation. I went through most of them, but only 3 stood out so far. Do you want me to tell them to go to your place, or are you going to pick them up? Tell them to gather at Buraka Scrapyard tonight at 9. I'll have Kurogiri bring them over. I want you here as well. You can either join them or get here however you normally do. Kadero ended the call there. I assume Jiren came through? He did. Kadero tapped on the bar top in thought. Maybe there is something to do about the sports festival after all. 20 minutes before 9 hit, Jiren walked through the door, his cigarette already lit. He sauntered up to the bar top to the seat he was at last time. Kurogiri passed him an ashtray as Jiren ordered a drink. A glass of whiskey on the rocks was pushed forward, the round ice cube swirling in the liquid. Jiren picked up the glass, nodding and toasting to both Kurogiri and the TV. Taking a swig, he let out a pleasured sigh. So where's the young master at? He wanted me to come by but didn't have the decency to greet me when I come in. Kadero Shigaraki had to step out for a moment. Kurogiri narrowed his eyes. He mentioned something about wanting to make sure something's ready. He should be back momentarily. Jiren let out an unamused grunt, returning to his cigarette and drink. Seeing as Kurogiri no longer wanted to engage in conversation, he took the quiet moment to appreciate the absolute normality of the bar. The shelves were stocked with a wide variety of spirits, most of them Jiren couldn't even recognize. Licenses and certificates were displayed on one of the walls, and it had a cozy feel to it. Had someone accidentally stumbled onto it, aside from the misty bartender, they would assume it was any other dive bar. A phone dinged from behind the bar, and wordlessly Kurogiri opened a portal. Kadero walked through, dressed in what looked like his villain outfit minus the knives sheathed on his legs, affixing his mask to his face before lightly dusting himself off. He glanced at Jiren and then to the clock hanging on the wall opposite to the bar and shrugged. Thanks for making it out here, he greeted. Jiren puffed a few times on his cigarette before putting it out. Think nothing of it, but even if you hadn't asked, I still would have come with them. It's only right I introduce them myself, and besides, he swirled his glass, watching the ice ball spin with the movement. Figured if I got here early I could enjoy myself a bit. By all means, Kadero lazily swept his arm out, gesturing to the bar. Kurogiri, it's nearly 9, why don't you bring them in? Kurogiri bowed as he disappeared within the mist. Returning his attention to Jiren, so what can you tell me before they get here? Well, only one of them has a real record, the other 2 are relatively green. Kadero paused, his head quirked to the right. Didn't I ask for seasoned criminals? If they're green, that means I'd have to babysit them. And here I thought you were smart, Jiren retorted, downing the rest of his drink. You also said you wouldn't mind if they have a code of sorts. If they're green, you can change them to whatever form or color you want. Kagero's eyes crinkled as he smiled, his eyes taking on a dangerous glint. He was about to reply but was cut off by the swirling purple of Kurogiri's portal. He stopped mid-thought and stepped back, allowing for more room on the floor. 3 figures walked through the portal, with Kurogiri materializing at the back. The first and tallest of the trio had spiky black hair, piercing blue eyes, and horribly burned and purple skin. Staples lined the borders between the healthy and burned skin holding them together. He wore a loose-fitting shirt under a ratty black jacket, black chino Hiawatha pants and shoes. The second was a teenage girl with ash blonde hair and twin messy buns. Her eyes were yellow and cat-like with excitement shimmering just beneath the surface. She wore a slightly oversized beige cardigan over what looked like a sailor suit uniform, with knee-length black socks and brown loafers. The third looked even younger than the girl. He was dressed in a standard gakuren with teal gloves and white shoes. Light brown tousled hair rested on his head. Under his arm he held a gas mask and green helmet that looked like they came from a military surplus store. Kadero didn't move to talk with them, opting to study the new arrivals and get a clue of what he was dealing with. None of the three looked like they were going to speak either. The black-haired man was looking over the bottles on the shelves instead, and the girl looked more lost and confused the longer the silence dragged on. The boy was the only one among them that tried to appear professional, trying to match the stare he was receiving from Kadero. Jiren, while thoroughly enjoying the standoff, decided he needed to be the one to start the conversation. He stood up from his stool and hooked an arm around the black-haired man, who looked displeased by the contact. "Guess I'll have to be the adult in this situation." He opened. "Shigaraki, may I present to you Himiko Toga, Dobby, and Mustard?" The girl, Toga, perked up and waved animatedly. The black-haired and burnt man, Dobby, just barely nodded his head in acknowledgement while shoving Jiren off his shoulders. The young boy, Mustard, readjusted his helmet and mask under his arm. Jiren stuck a thumb out, pointing to Toga. "Let's start with girly over here dash." With initial introductions out of the way, whatever trepidation or nervousness that held Toga were gone. "I'm Himiko Toga. And you're the one Mr. Staney was talking about." She cut Jiren off, her expression dropped to a serious glare. A knife appeared in her hand as she leveled it in front of her. "Is it true? Are you really working together?" Kadero took the change in tone in stride. "My definition of working together may be different than yours. I can tell you had more to say, so just finish it up." Toga held her glare for a second longer before her wide smile came back, the knife disappearing. Kadero didn't notice at first, but now that he's focusing on her, he sees defined canine teeth. Mild carnivore mutation? I want to live in the world Mr. Staney is trying to make. This world isn't fun, too many people are mean. Without the meanies in the world, I can finally feel at home. Kadero nodded and gestured to Dobby to start. Dobby looked Kadero over before starting. "What? You don't want to know her quirk? Don't think I didn't see you eyeing her." "Impressive." Kagero's eyes darted to Dobby's. "You're sharper than you look." "But no, I'm saving that question for the end. What's your piece?" "I go by Dobby." He huffed. "As for my piece, I plan to carry on the hero killers will long after he passes. If he doesn't want me, fine. I'll join you and help him from the sidelines." Dobby stared Kadero down, daring him to make a comment. "He may have pointed me towards you, but ultimately I follow his will. If there's one thing I want most out of this partnership, it's the death of Endeavor." At that, Kadero was intrigued. He was used to hearing people spout about how they want to kill All Might and any other hero, but those were always weak shows of strength. Dobby meant what he said and truly believed he could do it. Getting restless from having to wait, Mustard spoke up without his prompt. "I'm Mustard. My quirk lets me release a gas that puts people to sleep and dash." "I'm stopping you right there." Kadero cut him off. "Do you even know what this is? What's happening right now? This isn't the first day at school, kid." Dobby rolled his eyes and Toga stifled a giggle. "Why are you here?" Mustard paused, looking between the occupants of the bar, searching for a lifeline that wouldn't be thrown. He sighed, hunching his shoulders in defeat. Kadero felt his breath hitch, his vision flickering, overlapping Mustard and a shadow of an old memory. "I'm bullied at school and I'm unwanted at home," Mustard confessed. "My parents, if you could even call them that, don't care what I do so long. As the only reason I'm home is to sleep. At school I'm forced into a literal bubble because they don't want my quirk accidentally going haywire. The kids kick it around and cover the vents so I run out of air to breathe. I'm tired of being put down for something that I had no power in choosing." Mustard looked up at Kadero, his eyes shining with determination. "I'm here because the heroes made my life turn to absolute shit. They preach about how anyone can be a hero, but what they're really saying is anyone with a cool and flashy quirk can be a hero. Because my quirk isn't cool, it gives everyone the right to push me down, and I'm sick of it. I want to change how society looks at quirks." Kadero was impressed. Not only are their goals aligned with his, but there was also enough wiggle room in their goals to fit his. He made eye contact with Jiren, who just smirked. Jiren started a slow clap. Well done everyone, I couldn't have said it better myself. Now Shigaraki, anything you have to say to these wonderful, upstanding citizens? You all aren't half bad, but only one of you has a body count, and while that's not necessary, I need to know just how far you're willing to lose yourself, particularly you. Kadero pointed at Mustard. You're just a kid. You're jaded and have a major chip on your shoulder, but you're way too young to seriously be considering this path. Are you actually a villain? Dobby laughed. What villain tries to make others reconsider their life's choices? The kind of villain that isn't single-minded? Kadero shot back, or an absolute scum of a person. I may be a villain, but that doesn't mean I don't have standards. Now Mustard, are you 100% certain that you want to continue down this path? It won't be easy and it will involve blood. Mustard fiddled with his helmet and mask in thought. All the while this was going down, Toga sat herself down on one of the stools and was lazily spinning herself around, seemingly lost in her own world while she waited for whatever was happening next. Mustard finally came up with his answer. I'm sure. There's nothing at home for me and no one I care about. I'm starting over, and if it means I'll have to kill someone to prove it, then I will. Kadero studied him closely, young, impressionable, willing to get his hands dirty. He moved on to Dobby, who noticed and matched the look, arrogant, observant, clear motivation. Finally he looked at Toga, who was now sipping on a drink that Kurogiri must have given her, outcast, carefree, already ingrained in the life. Kadero reached up to his mask and retracted it. Fine. Kurogiri, get Jiren his payment for the lot. Hearing that, Jiren gave a lazy bow in gratitude. As for you three, welcome to the league. As a formal introduction, my name is Kadero Shigaraki, over there behind the bar is Kurogiri. Toga, Dobby, what are your quirks? And Dobby, Mustard, your names? Having received his payment, Jiren cut in quickly before they got started. I'll take my leave, then. Shigaraki, I'll let you know if there are any more. Again, now that the boring stuff was out of the way, Toga was back to her cheery self. My quirk is called Transform. It lets me change into anybody I want so long as I drink their blood. The more blood I have, the longer the transformation holds. She pointed to her teeth. My canines are sharp so that I can bite into people and drink their blood directly, but I don't like doing that unless they're cute. She crossed her arms in an X. That explains the teeth, but what was the source for the change? Toga seemed done with her explanation and was looking towards Dobby with interest. He sighed and brought his hand up, conjuring a ball of blue fire. Kagero's eyes sparkled. That will pair perfectly. That's my quirk. As for my name, I don't know you well enough to give it to you, so you're stuck with Dobby. I'm not budging on this. Mustard shifted on his feet. I'm not giving you my name either. If I'm starting anew, then I want to leave everything of my old life behind. Kurogiri, bring them to the warehouse. Kadero abruptly changed the topic. He addressed the group. I want to get a feel for your skills, so we're going to have a little test. That was all the warning they got before portals opened beneath them, swallowing them in the darkness. Shimura grunted as he was slammed onto the mats once again. He immediately swept his legs around, catching his opponent off guard. Getting back on his feet, he jumped at the downed opponent. From there, the fight devolved into intense grappling. He made sure to always keep a finger up so he doesn't accidentally disintegrate his opponent, a weakness that was constantly exploited as his opponent kept grabbing the extended finger and wiggling out of a hold. Shimura was able to secure the opponent's arm, seconds away from getting them into an arm bar before he felt a jolting pain in his right hand. He let go in shock, scrambling away. Shimura? You okay, man? Kaminari questioned. I swear you had me for good right then. Shimura cradled his right hand, shaking it off lightly. Yeah, I'm good. My hand just acted up. Is that normal? I thought you said recovery girl healed it for you, Kaminari asked as he stood back up. He grabbed a water bottle and handed it over. She did. Shimura nodded thanks, like, I can still use it and my quirk just fine, but my hand just randomly flares up in pain from time to time. I already asked her what's wrong, but she couldn't find anything. That's the hand that got crushed, right? Shimura flinched at the memory. Kaminari immediately backtracked. Right, sorry about that. Shimura waved him off, instead busying himself with taking a long swig of the water. But hey, thanks for agreeing to spar with me. I know I'm not the best fighter in the class, but if I can keep up with you, I know I can do well in the sports festival. Kaminari tried to lighten the mood. Shimura smiled, happily taking the change in topic. You and me both. But if I'm being honest, I think you'd do better than I will. What do you mean? Kaminari frowned in confusion. I mean, your quirk is way more versatile than mine, Shimura explained. You've got good offense and defense, while I'm only really good for offense and clearance. And killing, his mind added on. Kaminari waved his hands in front of him. What? No way, man. I have basically no control over it and a limited amount. Not to mention, if I go over that, I get all he emphasized as he acted out his way state, as he jokingly called it. Shimura hummed in agreement and gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. But you can still touch people and have decent range. I have my gloves, but something tells me I won't be able to use them for the festival, and the only way for me to use my quirk is if I'm in close contact. If I make it to the final round, I won't be able to fight properly. First, it's when you make it to the final round, Kaminari quickly reassured, holding up his fingers as he counted his points, and B, you don't even need to fight to win a match. All you gotta do is grab their arm or something and boom. They're forced to surrender. I thought the whole point of the sports festival was to show off your quirk? Oh yeah, Kaminari quickly conceded, but when you make it to first place, I don't think people will care about your quirk since all they'll want is to work with the winner. Besides, there'll be what, 3 events total? I bet you could show them what you can do in the first 2 rounds. Shimura's eyes widened in realization. He turned to Kaminari and gave a real smile. I totally forgot about the first 2 events. Thanks, Kaminari. Kaminari flashed him a smile and gave him a thumbs up. No problem, dude. Now come on, let's get cleaned up. I hear Bakugo's making dinner tonight, and I want to hide all the super spicy spices before he gets started. He makes great food, but I swear he no longer has taste buds. You're just weak against spice. Kaminari stuck his tongue out and headed to the showers. Shimura chuckled and shook his head, amused at his friend's antics. The sports festival is my chance to prove I can be a hero. I can't let this go to waste. He shook his head in determination. He was going to win the festival, and when he did, he'd give a nice big middle finger to Kadero as he bit into his gold medal. I am a hero, damn it. Shimura felt the crowd as soon as he and his class entered the tunnel. He could feel the sound wave of the crowd get funneled in and focused on the students waiting for their cue. If he placed his hand on one of the walls, he could feel it rumble from the spectators in the stands above him. He was in complete awe at the whole spectacle before him. Wow, Ciro remarked, it's like an earthquake in here. It's crazy to think how many people are probably standing right over us. It's pretty intimidating. Speak for yourself, man. Kirishima knocked his hardened fists together. Hearing those screams out there is amping me up. I can't wait to start this thing. Everyone. Ida's voice cut through the conversations. The sports festival is going to begin momentarily. Let us all prepare to exit and give our best performance for all. Not the best rallying speech, Vice Press, Kaminari chuckled, but it's alright cause I'm ready to go. Shimura stood beside Uraraka and Bakugo, letting his classmates' excitement and nerves wash right over him. He was too busy trying to think about how he could stand out in the festival. Everyone's going to be trying their hardest today, but here I am, about to willingly handicap myself. How can I even bother to stand in the same stands as them if I won't try my hardest myself? He felt a nudge on his arm. Looking over he saw Uraraka giving him a concerned look. Are you alright, Shimura-kun? You're looking kinda. She waved her hands above her head aimlessly, unable to find the word. He gave her a shy smile. He brought his arms up and lightly rubbed on them. I think I'm okay. I'm just getting a little nervous about this whole thing. Yeah, I know what you mean. She gave him a warm smile. It's crazy to think we'd be doing this so early into the year, especially when we barely got any training done. That's intentional, round face. Bakugo cut in. This is when we first get looked at by pros. If we show them how good we are with only a few weeks of training, they'll know we're the real deal and they'll want to work with us. Uraraka brought a finger up to her chin. Yeah, that makes sense. I hope I dash. She was cut off as present mix voice sounded out over the speaker system. Why Swarm, mass media. Gather around, one and all. The UA Sports Festival is about to begin. Guess it's time to go. Uraraka flashed Shimura a determined smile. All right, class. Yaoyorozu's voice sounded out over a megaphone, trying to talk over present mix introductions. We're about to head out. Even though this is a competition, I'd still like for us all to work together if given the chance so that we can all make it to the finals. Good luck to everyone. A chorus of cheers came up from the gathered students. Shimura shook himself out, willing his nerves to calm down. He felt Bakugo slug him in his arm. The silent reminder that he had his friend next to him helped calm down all the way. I got this. You know who they are. The rising stars who faced down villains and came out stronger and brighter than ever. From the first year's hero course, Class 1A. The class exited the tunnel and nearly stumbled as they were met with the combined force of the bright sun and the intensity of the crowd's excitement. Every seat in the stadium was filled, the occupants yelling and cheering and shouting as they finally got to see the competitors. Wow, I guess what we felt in the tunnel wasn't exaggerated at all, Kaminari remarked, smiling and waving at everyone, playing up the crowd. Next up. They may not have gotten the attention, but that doesn't mean they're pushovers. Introducing Hero Course, Class 1B. Present Mike continued his introductions as the other classes came out of their respective tunnels. The cheers were still deafening, but noticeably less than for their own entrance. Class 1B came out of the tunnel to their left, all of them in similar states of awe at the spectacle. Shimura glanced over to see the members of his sister class. He saw a wide variety of people, but what stood out the most was the number of stink eyes he was getting. A fair amount of the students were glaring at both him and the rest of his class. Most notably was from a boy with slicked blonde hair and light blue eyes. Not knowing what to make of it, he returned the glares with a confused look of his own before turning away to look over the crowd again. Now, coming from our general education track, classes 1C, D, and E. Don't take your eyes off these students, they're full of underdogs that can turn the tides. Man, is there really any reason for us to be here? He heard someone from the general education voice. We're only here to make the hero course look good. Well, that may be true, but at least we aren't from management, another replied, pointing a thumb behind them. Shimura followed the thumb to what he assumed was the management/business course. They were still waiting in their own tunnel, waiting for their cue, but Shimura saw their point. Every one of them looked utterly disinterested, choosing to stand in small groups, huddled together talking about whatever it is they're going over. Coming out of the tunnels looking like some crazy cyborgs, our support course students, classes 1F, G, and H. Last but not least, rounding out the classes, we have those from our business and management course, classes 1I, J, and K. There wasn't much pomp for the last few groups, as it was clear the only reason they were there was because they were forced to be. With all 11 first-year classes out on the field, they gathered in front of the small stage set up in the middle. From behind the stage, the students could see who the referee for this year's festival would be. A smock of dark purple and spiky hair showed up behind the stage, followed by red domino-shaped glasses. A few steps later, the R-rated hero, Midnight, came to view in all of her sultry glory. With the referee properly introduced, the crowd's yells seemed to reach a second crescendo. She took center stage, brandishing her cat-o'-nine-tails whip and flicking it to the side, causing another round of whoops to be heard. Welcome to this year's UA Sports Festival, she opened. Now that all the classes have gathered, a word from our student representative. She paused for dramatic effect, the audience waiting with bated breath as she let it ride out. Tenko Shimura. He heard his classmates' jaws drop on the floor. Shimura himself blanched in shock. Whoa, Shimura. I didn't know you beat Bakugo in the entrance exam, the big-lipped student, Sato, commented. It would make sense that the student representative is the person who placed first, Ida commented. Shut it, big lips. Bakugo bit, the nerd only beat me by a few points for some bullshit reason. But I scored more in villain points. Off to the side, another snide remark came from a girl from general education. First place in the entrance exam for the hero course, maybe. Tenko Shimura, come on up. Midnight prompted again, completely ignoring his inner turmoil. The people in front of him parted, making a path for him up to the stage. He anxiously scratched at his throat and stepped forward. When he finally made it to the stage, he stared out at the audience. He tapped on the microphone, causing feedback to sound out through the speakers. He saw his classmates and teacher wince in response. To be completely honest, I had no idea I was doing this. So, here I go? He took a deep breath, looking over at Midnight for reassurance. Smiled and gave him a nod. He cleared his throat again. Everyone standing before me earned their right to be here, whether in the hero, gen ed, support, or business course. He paused again, trying to gather his thoughts, taking in the audience's silence as he was searching for motivation. As if on cue, his hand flared up in pain again, immediately reminding him of what he bore witness to at the USA. On the first day, my class was told that it's a hero's job is to correct the unfairness in the world. Then, on the fourth day of class, we saw just how unfair the world could be. He saw some of his classmates nod their heads solemnly, clearly remembering the USJ. It's unfair that some of the students in Gen Ed couldn't make it into the hero course when I'm sure they have amazing quirks for a hero. He heard gasps come from the general education area. More than a few of the students' eyes were wide and had their jaws open. It's unfair to the students who are here competing today when they'd probably rather be tinkering. He gestured towards the support course, getting a few nods, or whatever it is the business students do. One of the students in the back yelled out, "Fair enough." Shimura looked straight into one of the cameras he knew that was focused on him. It's unfair that my class was attacked. But you know what? That's fine, because we're all still standing. We're putting ourselves out there to show that we're all heroes, whether in name or ideals, and we will do anything and everything we can to make everything fair again. So this is a challenge for you. I'll be giving it my all today to win this, and I'll be giving it my all to make my dream come true. The same could be said about everybody here. We're all going to move forward, and nobody will stand in our way. We're all going to go beyond, Shimura trailed off. Plus ultra. The stadium and students alike erupted in unity at the school's motto. Shimura stood stunned on the platform, both ashamed and proud of what he just said. He went completely off track with where he wanted to go with his speech. He didn't mean to say half of the things he did, and he certainly didn't mean to call out a certain villain that was no doubt watching this very moment, but he somehow turned it into a pretty inspiring speech. He lit a fire under everyone's seats, one that he's sure wasn't going to go out, no matter what was thrown at them. He felt pride in his classmates at their tenacity as he stepped down. As he rejoined his class back on the field, he received more than a few backpats and words of thanks and encouragement. He was sure that his friends and classmates were praising him for his passionate speech, but he wasn't paying attention. What the hell did I just do? That was so stupid. As if we needed another reason to have a target painted on our backs. My stupid mouth is gonna get me killed. Midnight retook her place on the stage. What a way to start off the festival. What do you all think? She was met with yells once again, flashing a smile before cracking her whip. Now hush, mommy's speaking. It's time for the first event. Kilometers away in the bar, Kadero, Dobby, and Kurogiri were watching the sports festival kick off. Kadero sat at his normal bar stool, nursing his gin and tonic, staring intently at the TV. He saw Shimura-chan step up to the stage. He leaned forward in interest, cranking the volume up so he could hear what he was saying. And nobody will stand in our way. We're all going to go beyond, the little Shimura-chan said on the TV. He was staring right into the camera, making it look as if he was staring right at Kadero. Oh, is that a dare, little Shimuran? A dark chuckle left his mouth, a puff of smoke soon after. Dobby caught his comment. So that's the brat you were talking about? He looks crustier than me. What's so special about him? He's a wolf trying to live among sheep. I know it. Dobby gave him an unimpressed stare. As much as I enjoy day drinking with my new illustrious leader, why keep me here when you've got the other two out? You're way too noticeable. Even if you cover up, you'll look even more suspicious. Mustard's still a kid with a clean slate, and Toga's quirk lets her look like anyone. Why would I send someone that stands out so much to spy around a place crawling with heroes? I'm not talking about why I'm not at the festival. I'm not stupid enough to think I could sneak around there, Dobby drawled, swirling his own glass. I'm talking about why keep me cooped up here when I could be doing literally anything else. Kadero turned the volume back down on the TV, spinning in his stool so he faced Dobby, because you and I will pair together well. I wanted us to get a little closer. I don't swing that way, Dobby immediately shot out. I'm talking about quirks, idiot. I'm not gay either, Kadero rolled his eyes. He took another sip of his drink before pushing it away and rolled up a sleeve, conjuring a ball of fire just like Dobby did. I'm a fire type as well, but I'm limited to white. Kagero's eyes focused a little as he willed the fire hotter, the color changing from orange to yellow to white, emphasizing his point. Kagero Shigaraki, please don't start fires in here. I don't want the alarms to go off again, Kurogiri admonished. Kagero let a breath out, releasing the fire as well. Dobby continued to look unimpressed. So? I've seen plenty of fire quirks. Yours is nothing special. Maybe, but neither is yours. Kagero shrugged, swiveling so he's back to facing the bar. You can produce blue, but based on your scarring, you can't maintain it too long else you'll burn up. I'll bet you learned that the hard way, right? Dobby tensed ever so slightly. Kagero smiled in amusement and kept talking. Every fire user has the same basic weakness. We can't sustain the fire too long or we risk burning ourselves. Your threshold is probably a lot lower than most of ours. What's your point? Dobby asked, still slightly on edge. Unless you're saying you can somehow get rid of that problem, I'm no longer interested in this conversation. Kagero gave an amused huff. Lighten up a little. I'm just trying to figure out what makes you tick, but I am serious about me wanting to get to know you better. With your fire and my quirk, there really isn't too much that can stand in our way. What is your quirk? Dobby inquired. There's no way you're just a simple thrower. Your mask looks like a dragon and you release puffs of smoke from your mouth, but you just showed me a fireball. Misdirection, was all Kagero said, as he blew a small plume of smoke at Dobby. Dobby's nose scrunched as he inhaled it. He waved at the smoke to dispel it, and when it cleared he tried to shoot back a response, but Kagero already turned the volume back up on the TV, his attention glued to the events, apparently finished with the conversation. Thrown off by the complete lack of a proper conversational flow Kagero follows, he shook his head and downed the rest of his drink, the liquid burning down his throat. That was a can of worms for future Dobby. Kurogiri, let me get another one. Mustard walked around the stalls that littered UA's grounds, utterly disgusted by what he was seeing but doing his best to hide it. He dressed in his casual clothes with a simple white t-shirt with blue trim and matching blue shorts. Besides him strolled a teenaged girl with the mid-length hair, the same shade as his, wearing a light pink skirt with a hood under a biker-style jacket with long brown boots. She was carrying a small peach-colored purse, swinging it around as she walked with a skip in her step. To everyone else, it just looked like a sister taking her little brother out to the festival. I don't get why we're here, Mustard lamented. It's not like we're actually going to be watching the events go on. The girl giggled and pat his head. Ah, don't be so bummed out. Shirkuan wanted you to get more experience with this sort of stuff. So you get to hang with your favorite big sis all day long. Mustard groaned. But what do we even do? All we've done so far is walk around looking at the stalls. I thought we'd be sneaking around the stadium or school. He was immediately pulled to the side, away from the main crowd. In front of him, the face of the girl whom Toga was impersonating was right in front of him. He felt a knife lightly press itself into his shirt. First things first, Toga started, her voice taking a serious tone. When out on a mission, a stealth and recon mission, you never talk about it. You don't know who could be listening in. She pressed the knife further. Second thing, whatever you think you know about sneaking around from movies or whatever, it's nothing like that. What did you notice when we were walking around just now? Mustard's eyes were filled with fear. He completely misread Toga when he met her a few days ago. He knew that she could be serious, but she's downright terrifying right now. It took a little while for him to realize that she asked him a question, but he was drawing a blank. Toga seemed to pick up on that as well, heaving a large sigh before she withdrew her knife. She stepped back and took a calming breath. If you want to survive, you need to take this seriously. The people here aren't your friends. Heroes aren't, and won't save you. You either live or you die in this world, and how you're acting you're going to die. Go call Kurogiri, I'll do this myself. Like a switch was flicked, Toga went back to the preppy girl that he met her as. A carefree and deceptively genuine smile plastered on her face as she skipped away to fade into the crowd. Mustard watched her go as he released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He stayed against the wall he was pushed against as he reined his heart rate in. Exactly what did he get himself into?